Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you for networking and being patient as we get started today. We're thrilled to have you here. I'm Erin Mogere. I'm the Associate Director of the Innovation Lab for Horticulture, and I'm also serving as the Innovation Lab Council Chair this year. I'm very pleased to welcome you all today. It represents a lot of hard work from our team at the Innovation Lab for Horticulture and also from USAID and USAID Kenya and East Africa Mission. So thank you so much for all of those that have worked really hard. And I should say also thank you to the Windsor for hosting us. It's a really beautiful place. So we're gathered here today for the 2023 Feed the Future Innovation Labs Regional Partners Meeting, where we'll be discussing systemic and innovative solutions for climate adaptation and mitigation in agriculture, food, and nutrition systems. The purpose of this meeting is to understand geographic differences, priorities, and trade-offs of climate change, mitigation, and adaptation. We want to highlight systems and scaling challenges and transformative solutions. And we want to embrace opportunities for local-led leadership and international collaboration. The research of the Feed the Future Innovation Labs is critical to understanding these challenges and operationalizing the appropriate solutions. There are 21 different labs based at US universities and one in Kenya that focus on critical crops such as groundnuts, legumes, and horticulture, and livestock, of course, and all aspects of the agricultural value chain, such as post-harvest, pest management, and concepts such as sustainability. In each of our labs, we not only take on important natural science questions, but also social questions around policy, economics, and equity. The 21 Feed the Future Innovation Labs work in more than 43 countries, connected with 78 of the top US universities and colleges. And we partner with more than 400 organizations in the Feed the Future Innovation Lab countries, Feed the Future countries. We not only partner with higher learning institutes, but also CGIAR centers, government ministries and extension, implementing partners, the private sector, and community-based not-for-profit entities. Under USAID's guidance, the labs are also making great strides in putting the power of leadership into the hands of many of our in-country partners. And within the United States, we are incorporating more and more minority-serving institutions into Feed the Future programming. By ensuring a diverse and representative pipeline of innovation, we are more likely to meet the dynamic and heterogeneous global challenges that we face. Ultimately, the labs contribute over 100 academic publications on average per award, and a recent study showed that the return on investment for the innovation labs is more than 8-to-1. As we think about climate change, one of the most pressing challenges we and the next generation faces, we must turn to not just mitigation activities, but also adaptation. The challenge each community faces will be localized with a role to play in both mitigation and adaptation. Those here in Africa and certainly in Kenya are experiencing right now the dire effects of climate change. And on an even more granular level, the ability for specific groups to cope with these effects will be different in each community. Over the next 2 days, we will consider a systems approach to climate change, one that considers not just the agricultural value chain, but also social considerations, enabling environments, and human health, so that we can build our solutions in a manner that support resiliency and social transformation. We also think carefully not just about the framing of the challenge, but how to operationalize the solutions through interdisciplinary research and cross-sector partnership. This meeting represents a critical cross-section of those working to innovate and implement key results. To this end, I hope during the next 2 days, we can discuss not just the external challenges that we face, but how we can most effectively work together to align with our shared goals. What about our systems, our ways of thinking, our partnerships need to change or be more efficient or strengthened in order to meet these high-level goals? So with that, I will turn it to Rob Bertram, who will introduce our most important dignitaries, and we're so grateful to have you here today. Rob is someone who doesn't need much introduction, but I will say that he is the chief scientist at USAID's Bureau of Food and Resilience and Food Security, where he serves as the key advisor on a range of technical and program issues to advance global food security and nutrition. In this role, he leads USAID's evidence-based efforts to advance research, technology, and implementation in support of U.S. government's global hunger and food security initiative, Feed the Future. Thank you, Rob.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much, Erin. And I just want to start by giving a shout out to Erin and the Horticulture Lab for all the leadership and work. You know, putting a meeting like this together is not for the faint of heart. And Carol Levin, big stars for the teams that brought us here today. So thank you. So I'm not going to say a lot about the context. We're going to dive into the focus of the meeting. But I did want to start out by saying that all of us focused on agriculture, food, and nutrition, we've always known that innovation is especially important in our work, research, technology, biological science, physical science, social science, in part because we're dealing with such complex systems with so many living elements that are changing all the time, pests, diseases, and now climate change. So not only could we never stand still, we have to run even faster. And that's why the work that all of you are doing, and frankly, I want to say I was just with Permanent Secretary Kim Tai and Mike Michener and Sheila Rokeet as we went around the innovations in the next room. I really recommend you all take the time to see these. It's really a fantastic story. And that's why we're starting a little late, but I think we can all agree that that was for a good reason. So with no further ado, I would like to start by welcoming Sheila Rokeet from our USAID Kenya East Africa mission. She's the Deputy Mission Director there. It's very fitting that we're having this meeting here in Nairobi, both because there's so many missions connected to the Nairobi mission, and of course, many more mission partners from across Africa are here, but also so many of the labs are working here in Kenya. So it was really exciting, for example, to see a lab that's actually being led here in Kenya. But Sheila is a leading voice in USAID in the areas of food, agriculture, and resilience. She was director of the Agricultural Research and Policy Office in the Bureau for Food Security, and then it became part of the resilience agenda, where she has been involved for many years. She's worked in resilience in the context of Asia, Africa, and a fantastic career and a fantastic friend. And I think many of you, or some of you, probably remember her from when she was leading our work in the Bureau. So it's a real pleasure to have you here today. Welcome, Sheila.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob, and good morning, everyone. First, I would like to say a few welcomes to Deputy Assistant Administrator Mike Michener from our Resilience and Food Security Bureau, the Principal Secretary Kim Tai from the Ministry of Agriculture here. He changed his plans. He was supposed to be in Ethiopia today, I understand, but when he found out this was happening, he changed his plans to spend the day here. Of course, we have the Chief Secretary, Rob Bertram, who everybody knows and loves, and a dear friend of mine. And everyone here today, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. We have several of our USAID missions. We have our African research partners. We have members of the private sector. We have a lot of people here today. And so thank you for taking the time. This is my favorite sentence of everything in Kenya, all protocols observed. I'm going to keep my remarks to three main things here today. And the first of how research and development is so important in Kenya and in the entire region. You're lucky you came here today. It's beautiful. It's green. This is one of the loveliest places that you could be for this meeting. But if you had come about 6 weeks ago, it would not have been green. It would not have been green at all. We have had 5 failed rainy seasons, and it was the longest drought on his recorded history in the last 70 years. And so climate change has already been brought up, but we're experiencing it here very, very deeply. There are 4.4 million Kenyans who are in need of food assistance due to this drought. So we hope with the rains that have come now that we're on our way to recovery, but it's still going to take some time. And so a lot of our investments end up going towards our humanitarian response. Climate change we've seen has really changed the drought cycles here. So drought is nothing new to this region, right? But what we're seeing is the drought cycles are shortening and they're intensifying. What used to happen every 7 years is now coming on every 3 years. What used to be maybe 1 or 2 failed rainy seasons is now going into 5. And so the importance of the research and development that you're doing, as you know, when the technologies that are required to deal with things like climate change have to be thought about 10, 20 years in advance to get those pipelines of technologies to the people when they need them. And so the drought probably would have been a lot worse had the work that you all are doing had not been thought about many, many years ago. The second point I'd like to make, it was fascinating to see all of the great innovations next door. And one of the things that kept going through my mind is scaling, right? How do we take these fabulous things to scale? The work that we invest in, and the USAID has been a proud investor in research and development for many, many decades, to a large degree because of the championing of Rob Bertram within USAID of how important it is, right? But those investments are done at our headquarters level. And so I'm sitting here on the ground. I sit here in Kenya, and our budget last year was $720 million that we spent here in Kenya alone. We half of that money was for humanitarian assistance, but the other part of it was for health, for our economic growth programs, very importantly, our Feed the Future programs, water, trade and investment, our environment programs, education, and the like. And so while you're here these next couple of days, really connect with the people in the missions, because the work that we're doing with the rest of the $320 million that we were programming is to work with the private sector. Most of what we do is looking at private sector-led solutions to development problems. So we are supporting the micro and small level enterprises all the way through to multinational corporations and how they're investing in Kenya. And so when you're thinking about how your technologies are actually going to get to the people, if you connect with the missions, with the government, that is how those innovations are going to get out there. The second way that we do business is through localization. We have very much adopted that here in Kenya. We work closely with our government counterparts, both at the national level, but at the county level and the sub-county level. And we are putting over 40% of our resources now directly to Kenyan organizations. And so again, as you're thinking about how are you going to get your technologies out there, there are probably other programs that we're working on, that the government are working on, that we would be able to get those technologies out there. You may have heard our administrator, Samantha Power, talk about progress beyond programs. And so what she means by that is, how do we use our connections to get things done beyond the programming dollars we have? And so I'll use a small example here, connected to the drought and connected to peanuts for the Peanut Innovation Lab, or the Groundnut Innovation Lab. And that was part of our response to the drought, was providing these nutritious food supplements, the therapeutic feeding, which are peanut-based. There was a shortage of production around being able to provide those to UNICEF, to the World Food Program, to the other organizations that are delivering those products. And so we went to the manufacturer and we talked to the manufacturer what the constraints were for him to be able to ramp up production to meet the needs for the drought, right? And so we were able to, through our connections, through the embassy's connections, connect someone who is a high net worth individual who was able to give $50 million the next week to UNICEF to front end the procurement of these commodities. And he was able to ramp up production and increase it 6 months ahead of schedule. And so those are the things we're talking about in terms of progress beyond programs. But when we looked at that manufacturer trying to ramp up production for the ready-to-use therapeutic foods, he needed a supply of peanuts that didn't have aflatoxins. And so again, trying to think about where those production lines are from the smallholder farmers all the way through to production, that's where people on the ground can help you out. The last point I would like to make is that our collaborative work on research and development is good for America, is also good for Africa. From the trade and investment that ensues as a result of a lot of the work that the research and development feeds all the way through to the jobs and then getting down to ensuring that the people on the ground have the nutritious food that they need to deal with the global food needs that we have here. So with that, I would like to conclude my remarks. I would just like to say thank you so much. And please do take the time to get to know others in the room to make those connections so we can have the impact that we're looking for. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sheila. You know, you've flagged several things that I think are going to be key threads throughout our meetings and discussions. The role of the private sector, the role of localization, which I will say the labs were probably a little ahead of their time in that regard, because they've always had that in their DNA. This is a 50-50 partnership with local partners. And we saw that today, didn't we, Harry, in the room next door? It was wonderful to see how that's maturing and growing even greater. And then just the partnership opportunities that the missions can help all of us on the innovation and research side achieve. Wonderful to be reminded of that. And I'm so glad that we have so many mission partners here with us this week. So now I'd like to welcome our Deputy Assistant Administrator in the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security, Mike Michener. Mike oversees the strategic direction and implementation of USAID's work in agriculture-led growth and nutrition, and the Bureau's efforts to engage and build partnerships with the private sector. So a perfect segue to what we were just talking about. And the research community. And Mike has an extraordinary background that he has brought to us as part of the Biden-Harris administration at USAID. He led the Foreign Agricultural Service for 4 years. Then he moved and led USDA's engagement with the Rome-based agencies that are focused on food issues. And he's worked on the private sector side with CropLife and other kinds of partners. So he has a tremendous background to help all of us on the innovation side really do just what she was talking about in terms of making those connections. So delighted you're here, Mike, and over to you.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for that very generous introduction. Good morning, everybody. Such a pleasure to see everyone here today for this first in-person meeting since the start of the COVID pandemic. I remember many of our on-screen meetings, so it's good to see you all in person, get to know how tall you really are. So we're here today because the world is facing a global food security crisis of historic proportions. To satisfy the growing demand for food, a projected 70% increase in global agricultural production will be required by 2050, while at the same time decreasing its contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. Climate change has already been mentioned a few times this morning. Along with the global food security crisis, the world is facing a global climate crisis. Together, these intertwined crises are disrupting national food systems. The world's rural poor, who depend on agriculture for their food and livelihoods, will be the hardest hit. To help ensure that the global demand for safe and nutritious food can be met, USAID leads Feed the Future, the US government's global hunger and food security initiative. Feed the Future takes a comprehensive, long-term approach to ending poverty, food security, and malnutrition. A key Feed the Future investment is research for development through the Feed the Future Innovation Labs. The innovation labs with their host country research partners develop science-based solutions to improve food security and reduce the impact of climate change. So glad to see all 20 innovation labs here for this meeting. The innovation labs are also committed to training the next generation of scientists who can research and develop solutions to their country's food security challenges. Our investments and research partners, many here today, are already catalyzing transformative change to ensure that what we grow, how we grow it, and who benefits leads to a more productive, sustainable, and resilient global food system. And I highly commend the theme, what we grow, how we grow it, and who benefits was the theme of Administrator Samantha Power's speech on agriculture at the World Food Prize in Iowa last October. I highly commend it. Please call it up and see it. Countries with strong research systems produce a steady stream of new technologies for their farmers to achieve higher agricultural productivity, which leads to poverty reduction. Investment in long-term solutions to food insecurity today reduces the need for costly food aid in the future and builds countries' abilities to solve their food security constraints. So you might ask, why USAID, primarily a development agency, funds research? It's very simple. To overcome the world's growing food security challenges and nourish billions of people, revolutionary research breakthroughs are needed. Looking back, the Green Revolution was a response to an exponential increase in population from 2.5 billion in 1950 to 6 billion in 2000, an increase of 3.5 billion people in 50 years. The Green Revolution, the third agricultural revolution, does anyone in the room know who named it? You know. Anyone else? USAID. USAID named the Green Revolution in 1968. The third administrator, William S. Goud, gave a speech extolling the Russians were pushing a red revolution, the Iranians had their white revolution, America was pushing a revolution in agriculture, a green revolution. So our start in agricultural research actually started way back in the 1960s, a little bit before Rob joined the agency. Looking forward, the estimated world population in 2050 will grow to 9.8 billion. Again, 3.8 billion increase over 50 years. Our food systems need to keep up with the growing world's population. Research creates a pipeline of technologies and innovations that are crucial to building resilient food systems. Without this pipeline, we would forever trying to catch up. The food security target continues to move, and we must move with it. What we are is on the verge of a fourth agricultural revolution, and you here are all leading it. And that's what the administrator's speech in Iowa was actually about. So what lies ahead? Erin and her colleagues have a great program for us over the next 2 days. We will examine the systemic challenges posed by climate change, the points of entry and approaches to build resilient food systems, and how to operationalize solutions. One approach the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security has embraced is the product life cycle. The product life cycle is an end-to-end management tool that advances a product or innovation based on fit or need and identifies the downstream actors who must be engaged at each stage as the product or innovation advances. The product lifecycle helps many small producers and businesses link together to engage in production and commercialization. You will learn more about that later this morning. I'll stop here. Today and tomorrow, you will hear different perspectives and approaches that may broaden your understanding, question your assumptions, and hopefully inspire you to continue your valuable work. Thank you. And I'm handing it to Rob or to Erin? Rob, there we go. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mike. And ladies and gentlemen, it's really now my great honor to introduce our special guest this morning. This is Harry Kim Tai. He is the Principal Secretary of the State Department for Livestock in the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries, and Irrigation in Kenya. He is an economist. I love economists because I'll just say I love them because they help us decide how much of what. So it's great to have an economist serving in where you are, Harry. And he specializes in regional planning and economic growth, which of course is right in the heart of what Sheila was talking about. He has served on the board of the Capital Markets Authority in Kenya and has a wide experience in a range of planning administration issues. So he really gets the context that Sheila talked about, that Mike talked about. And we're just so fortunate. And I have to say, I really enjoyed walking through there with you, Harry. He was so interested and asked so many great questions. So we're very, very fortunate to have us here. And Kenya is such an incredible partner for USAID. Your Calro, your Kari before it, Kefis, so many others. So just delighted to have you here, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Robert. Indeed, it was really a pleasure to walk around with you, especially listening to the innovators showcasing their research findings and how applicable it is to Kenya. Let me first start with acknowledging the presence of the Deputy Mission Director who has just been with us and she's left because of other engagement. Sheila, it was really a pleasure meeting her as well. This is our second engagement, and thank you, Michael, for introducing me to Sheila. Sheila was here much earlier than you, but when you came all the way from here, you did that interaction when we sat together in the same table. Thank you so much. The Assistant Administrator, the Resilience and Food Security, Michael, thank you and welcome again to Kenya. The Chair, Innovation Lab, Council of Directors, Erin Makwaya. Chief Scientist, Bureau of Resilience and Food Security, Robert Bartram. Pleasure meeting you as well. Very interesting gentleman to walk around with. We anticipated to be with the Director of CalDRO. If the representative is here, I want to acknowledge you. The Innovation Labs directors that have met today around as I was visiting, invited guests, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am indeed delighted this morning to join you in this auspicious occasion that is bringing together the Innovation Lab directors and partners. The theme of this meeting is, as explained earlier, is systemic innovative solutions for climate adaptation and mitigation in agriculture, food and nutritional systems. And it's really timely and provides good opportunities for policy recommendations. I have noted that the delegates are drawn from, as I was going around, and this is something that I noted, that most of the delegates are from the US colleges and universities and centers alongside various partner countries, research and education institutions, innovation labs involved in top-notch scientific research under the support of the USAID. I also met a team from Kenya, and I was very impressed with our young scientists who were explaining to us on the use of technology. I didn't know that you can use a mobile phone to detect whether there are pests or whether there are diseases in plants. This is for the first, I think I'm the first one in Kenya to know that in terms of policy. So I have to pride myself as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, Kenya and the United States of America have had a long history of cordial relationship and collaborations. As evident here today, USAID programs remains our key development partner supporting many critical sectors of our economy. As you are aware, from the year 2012, Kenya has been included to participate among other countries in the USG Global Food Security Strategy, formerly known as Feed the Future, which is aiming to combat hunger, malnutrition, and poverty through investments directed towards promoting agriculture-driven economic growth, enhancing the resilience of individuals and systems, and also improving the nutritional well-being of the population with a particular focus on women and children in the targeted areas. This Feed the Future initiative is strengthening for local food systems in key value chains, specifically dairy. I saw how you use innovations to have the condensed nutrients remain within the products for a longer time. Horticulture and livestock. So the current efforts on prioritizing the drought-resistant crops makes the Ministry of Agriculture a major beneficiary and contributor to Kenya's Kenya Kwanza plan, which is dubbed, for those who are coming for the first time, this is called the Bottom-Up Economic Transformation Agenda 2022-2027. Bottom-up means we start from down, going up. That means you reach the wider population, and then by the time you reach up, you will have achieved your target. So this will help in improving the nutritional well-being of the population, which here in Kenya, as mentioned by Sheila, that as a result of droughts, we have about 4.3 million Kenyans who are in need of humanitarian assistance arising from the recent drought, which has been unprecedented. For example, in livestock sector, we lost 2.5 million heads of cattle. So you can imagine how that has costed us economy and how that is causing us nutritional and food stress. We're also having 942,000 malnourished children aged between 6 to 59 months. And in addition, we have 135,000 pregnant and lactating women who are in need of treatment. The focus on women and children is laudable and will make a real change for our country. Ladies and gentlemen, and for the first time, those who are maybe coming to Kenya, our constitution enshrines that food and nutrition security as a basic human right. That means as a government, we must ensure that everybody has food in sufficient quantity and also the quality that is required. So no one should go to sleep without food. That's what the government of Kenya is targeting, to make sure that no one goes to sleep without food. Thus, this collaboration, support, and contribution from the American people through the USAID ensures that all Kenyans throughout their life enjoy safe and nutritious food in sufficient quantity and quality that meets their nutritional needs for optimum health and productivity. As you all know, the agriculture sector has a large impact on nutritional outcomes and is a critical component of Kenya's budget. Sustainable agriculture and food systems have a key role in improving food security and nutrition while promoting food safety and healthy diets. The government of Kenya is committed to transforming agri-food systems and is ready to deliver on healthy diets as envisioned in various documents for scaling up nutrition in agriculture sector and food systems as a sustainable measure for alleviating food and nutritional security. Ladies and gentlemen, although the government is gearing towards enhancing farmers' food and nutritional security and resilience, there are a lot of challenges that's creating obstacles along the way. One that has been mentioned by Sheila again is on climate change. We've seen the devastation of climate change. Indeed, the cycle has reduced. In fact, I think it's going to be an alternate. Every year you get good rains, the following year you expect a drought. That's where we're anticipating. And we hope through the interventions the government is putting in terms of afforestation, we might go back to our old system where we have plenty of rains. However, I have noted that the purpose of this meeting is to understand geographical differences, priorities, and trade-offs of climate change, mitigation, and adaptation, to highlight systems and scaling up challenges and transformative solutions, and to embrace opportunities for local-led leadership and international collaboration. Thus, the collaboration between the US and Kenya will be crucial to combat the climate change effects and come up with the practical solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to recognize the huge support in research extension and training undertaken by the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for animal health based here in Kenya. I understand that this is the only innovation lab whose director is based at the partner country and is an excellent example of the local research and implementation. This is what we call bottom-up economic transformation agenda. When you have a local person here, that's the real bottom-up. Thank you so much, Feed the Future. The Animal Health Innovation Lab improves human nutrition and food security for addressing the East Coast fever, which is the main health constraint to dairy and beef industry in Kenya and most of the Eastern and Southern African countries. The transdisciplinary approach addressing the challenge through the lens of the epidemiologist, vaccinologist, economist, social anthropologist, all working together is innovative and critical for finding sustainable solutions to complex issues such as malnutrition and food security. To address this challenge and others that are emerging, it is critical to develop a strong human resource of animal health researchers. I therefore applaud the USAID for supporting Animal Health Innovation Lab to train 10 PhD students on full scholarship here in Kenya. 8 are in Kenya and 2 are in the Washington State University. We also note that there are several graduate students and undergrad students that are being supported, and we really want to applaud the Feed the Future. The State Department for Livestock Development recognizes this initiative, and I am pleased to report here today that USAID support towards establishing molecular and diagnostic lab for animal health at the University of Nairobi is now finalized and is fully operational. This will go a long way in supporting the Directorate of Veterinary Services within the State Department of Livestock Department to deliver on its mandate on animal health research and support the region as well. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, these strong relations being built between our local universities and research institutions and the US universities through innovative labs presents here today is really commendable. We fully support this equitable partnership and recognizes them as a critical for developing and scaling up innovations that accelerates our attainment of full health and economic potential of our people. I think this has been underscored by Sheila, that we need then to have close collaboration between both the public institution, the private sector, and the NGO. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, the ministry is looking forward to get workshops recommendations to anchor on its various policy formulations on the discussions of the key areas facing society that will be discussed in this meeting, that is specifically the issues of climate change, variability, adaptation and mitigation measures, scaling up innovation, food losses and waste, food safety, among other topics that will be handled in the course of this workshop. I have noted that organizers have set up time to visit the fields and specifically our research center, the KALRO, Kenya Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization, and also to visit Murang'a County to see what is going on there, what our farmers are doing, how our farmers are going to benefit from these innovations. This will be great opportunities for delegates to also experience and interact with our researchers, farmers, and key innovators. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I want to wish all of you a fruitful workshop and stay in Nairobi, stay safe. I think you have come at the right time. Whoever chose this particular month really knew the cycle of Nairobi. This is the best month to be in Nairobi for those who are coming from outside. So enjoy, have the best of it. And I hope that you'll also have time, Michael, to give your delegates time to visit our national park, which is not far. When you say national park, you might think you're very far. The national park is just within the city. In fact, it's within the city center. So you can imagine a national park within the city center. Please have a time to visit that and enjoy. And I hope out of your innovations, my team from KALRO and others will take you through so that you have a little bit of what we love here in Kenya. We call it nyama choma. Yeah, out of those innovations, you need to roast the meat and enjoy it. That's the most lovely part of it. Thank you and God bless you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Maybe just one more round of applause for our amazing dignitaries and principal secretary. Thank you so much. I just briefly will give you just a little bit about logistics before I bring the next panel up on stage, which will also be moderated by Rob. We have a lovely panel that will lead us through setting the stage for this conference. We'll be talking about our systems framework, mitigation and adaptation, and working towards resilience and transformation. So we have a really lovely panel to talk about systems perspective, resilience, and transformation. Just to give you a little bit of an overview, the panels essentially will be coming up on stage. They'll generally be about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll have Q&A. And generally, we will be the first day discussing framing the challenges, understanding the systemic challenges and leverage points to catalyze change. And the second day, we'll be talking about operationalizing solutions. If you have any questions, please feel free to come up to the Innovation Lab for Horticulture team. If you all could just raise your hands quickly. We have Beth, the director of the Innovation Lab here, and others circling around. So with that, Rob, we will invite you up to stay on the stage, and this panel will be about 30 minutes long. So come on.
Thank you, Erin. So we're quite late in our schedule, but I think for good reasons. So apologies to our next set of speakers. I think we're going to propose that this next session be just about half an hour, so we won't have quite as much time for discussion. But as Erin says, this is a high-level framing session. And then we will have our coffee break for 20 minutes until 11:10 and start that following session at 10 minutes after 11. So I would like to invite the three speakers up now, starting with Dr. Felister Makini. She is the Deputy Director for Crops at the Kenya Agriculture and Livestock Organization, CALRO. Prior to this, she worked as the Deputy Director at the Department of Outreach and Partnerships in KARI, which was the Kenya Agricultural Research Institute, its predecessor of CALRO. She was responsible for promoting the dissemination and adoption of technologies from KARI, products and services. She's a plant pathologist with a PhD from the University of Greenwich in the UK. So, Philip, are you here? Then a second speaker I'd like to invite up is a colleague from the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security, Ann Vaughn. She joined the Biden-Harris administration in February 2021 and works in USAID's Bureau for Resilience and Food Security as our senior advisor on climate change, and co-leads the implementation of the President's Emergency Plan for Adaptation and Resilience, also known as PREPARE, and works across RFS to integrate climate considerations across food, water, and nutrition programming. I'll also say that Ann has just come off an incredible week at the Agricultural Innovation Mission for Climate, AIM for C. She's very active in advancing our issues and the role of innovation and research as addressing climate change in places like the COPs. Ann is really an extraordinary advocate, and we have a reorg going on now at AID where we're bringing climate adaptation and mitigation together, which I think makes a lot of sense. It's right in the heart of the theme of this week's sessions. So great to have you with us. Thank you so much for coming in. So we have Simon Omondi coming here from CALRO. Welcome, Simon. We're really delighted to have you with us. And then finally, I have our third speaker to welcome is Vanessa Adams. She is the Vice President for Strategic Partnerships at AGRA. She has over 25 years of experience in 42 countries, integrating over 12 agriculture and consumer goods value chains into regional and global markets. So this is really the implementation delivery end of the spectrum. So critical to have that piece here as well. Vanessa previously worked in West Africa and the Export Business Development Director and the Trade and Investment Director. She's worked on fertilizer policy. She's worked on scaling in Ethiopia. She was the chief of party at the West Africa Trade Hub program. The only there's a lot of things left out here, but one of them that's not here is Force of Nature. And so we're really delighted. Vanessa is also leading PIATA, which is promoting Partnership for Inclusive Agricultural Transformation in Africa, funded by USAID, Gates, the Brits, the Germans, and an incredible partner that is taking the innovations from partners like these and integrating those into on-the-ground efforts, policy efforts, value chains. So thank you all. I really three high-level questions to just frame this. Enabling and you've seen the questions, I hope, but they really to help us and also think through some of the key words in the title of our Feed the Future Innovation Lab for small-scale innovation, systemic and innovation solutions for climate adaptation and mitigation in agriculture, food systems, and nutrition. It's a theme that's going to come up again during our discussion. Simon, I'd like to start with you. Thank you for that. Now, Ann, I'd like to turn it to you. Could you share with us your perspective of what a systems approach is, a systemic approach, and working at that level? And I'm going to pass the mic to you.
Thank you for that question. I would like to start by sending apologies for Director General, who is out of the country, and our Deputy Director General, who is also engaged elsewhere. Nevertheless, we are a strong team from CALRO that is representing the organization. And thank you for the organizers for inviting us to be able to participate in this panel. Now, the question is, what is a systems approach? This is of interconnectedness and the processes working together for a common purpose, influencing specific outcomes. These outcomes, for the case of agriculture, they are food and nutrition security, socioeconomic, and even mental benefits. A system of subsystems and a boundary. For instance, as an agricultural research organization, mandate has a clear boundary for the case of CARO to streamline and coordinate agricultural research. And the second one, to expedite the access to knowledge, information, technologies, and management practices, and to disseminate this to the clients for the purpose of improving food and nutrition security. So in a nutshell, the various systems, the various subsystems which form the system, and this is a connection and interaction of various stakeholders in the public-private sector, becomes very key for the purpose of CARO in scaling the new innovations. And for us in CARO, development partners such as USAID are very key in creating an enabling environment for scaling these technologies. Now, within the system perspective, some of the challenges that may be able to hinder the scaling of innovations for the purpose of adaptation, resilience, and even food and nutrition security are issues of an enabling policy environment. Very key indeed, the policy and the institutions. The other one, for the purpose of agriculture, is markets for agricultural commodities. CARO, if I may give an example, responding to the challenge of climate change, we've developed and disseminated more than 1,700 innovations in different agroecological systems. We have mapped Kenya into what we call the CARO Climate Smart Agricultural Village, so that these innovations are for increasing productivity, for adaptation and mitigation, are context specific. And we have overlaid this in the entire country, working with the private sector and with our CARO network of 57 centers all over the country. So allow me to quickly go to the enablers. I would like to turn this into an enabling environment instead of challenges. So about policy, the markets, because the biggest question that farmers will ask you, even with the best of innovations, is after increasing productivity, so what? And therefore, within my experience with sub-Saharan Africa, the issue of markets become very important. Who can be able to provide the market? Of course, not the public sector, but the strong private sector leadership. The other one, which has become increasingly important, and the speakers before me talked about the worst drought we have ever had. Even with the technologies from CARO, one of the lessons we are learning in the systems perspective is the need to be able to prioritize agriculture in nexus with water. And one of the options could be access to small-scale irrigation equipment. That way, the innovations that are coming from agricultural research will be able to find their impact in various agro ecosystems. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate your flagging the importance of the enabling policy environment, markets, the role of the private sector, and also the shout out to small scale irrigation. We have a Feed the Future Innovation Lab for small scale irrigation led by Texas A&M University. It's not here at this particular meeting, but I think it's a theme that's going to come up again during our discussions over the next few days. So thank you for that. Now, Anne, I'd like to turn it to you. And your question is resilience. What do we mean by this? And keeping in mind, I think that we have this overarching framing for this meeting. Over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Rob, and really appreciate these remarks before. And you're gonna have to excuse me. I'm gonna read the definition of USAID has for resilience, because right now we are in Kenya was kind of the birthplace of a lot of the resilience thinking and work that USAID pulled together about 10, 12 years ago, because the Horn and Kenya were facing increasing shocks 12 years ago. And just as we've heard from previous speakers, we're facing unprecedented droughts again. So what do we mean by resilience? So I get it right, is the ability of people, households, communities, countries, and systems to mitigate, adapt to, and recover from shocks and stressors in a manner that reduces chronic vulnerability and facilitates inclusive growth. So basically, we have to figure out, how do we help people, empower people to be able to develop when we're facing increasing shocks? And my title is Senior Advisor for Climate Change. So we're here talking about climate change. So there's a whole host of shocks like COVID that we've just seen that communities will face, and we should definitely, in conflict that communities are facing. But just because our topic today is on climate change, we are tripling down as an agency to try to figure out, how do we help communities and countries adapt to climate change. We have a very ambitious target in our climate strategy of helping 500 million people adapt to and become more resilient to climate change. And guess what? All of my Innovation Lab partners, my USAID friends, you guys are on the hook to help us get to some of those numbers. So one of the things I think we are thinking about from the agency perspective, from this impressive and aggressive climate change strategy that is meeting the moment, meeting the needs, and the fact that we are facing the 6th failed planting season in the Horn this year, is how do we get impact from what we're doing to build resilience and really hold ourselves accountable to these high-level targets we have, because they really mean something on the ground and for people's lives to be able to build resilience to climate change and the climate impacts that we're facing. So with that, my call and plea for this week, and hopefully we'll dig into this, is that we cannot be doing business as usual. Just because we put climate or adaptation and mitigation in front of something doesn't mean you're actually helping. You really have to think deep. And when we think about resilience, a lot of it is knowledge and learning. And we have to look at what the climate models are, the climate impacts. And there's some good resources that we have available at headquarters, but that also, I see my friend from Malawi, Jeff, here, who's done some really interesting stuff looking at country-specific impacts. So before we start saying we're going to focus on this crop and support this crop in this part of the country, is that crop going to be viable in 10 to 15 years? Now, maybe the farmers need it now and need help right now, but let's not maladapt and think about we have to think about the longer term resilience of our farmers and communities that we're working in, to be thinking about this, the next generation and the next 5-10 years, because we know yields are already decreasing, especially in tropical zones for agriculture. So we have to really put knowledge and information into the hands of farmers. And that's also us making sure we're using the best available knowledge to inform our activities and our programs. And that's something we're looking at very deeply around building resilience. I'd also put a shout out to my Center for Resilience colleague here, Catherine Stahlberg, to go also something that's really important if we're also thinking about resilience is social protection, and how we are making sure that communities are able, especially the lowest forest, lowest quintile, are able to survive and not fall even further into poverty. There's been some really good research that's very evidence-based that shows there's government policies and enabling environments so that we can protect that bottom quintile and help sort of support broader resilience. So a couple calls to action are, don't forget about the bottom quintile. Let's remember what policies can we help to support those, but also using information to empower people to address the really scary threats that are happening now and are sadly going to get worse. Not to be a downer, so I'm going to pass back to Rob, or Vanessa can talk about more how we're going to address all of this.
Thank you so much, Anne. And I think part of the meeting is to think of the spatial, geographic differences and so forth, but you've added the important concept of temporal differences as well. Again, appreciate the framing, and I think reminding us, as Sheila did too this morning, that we are in the heartland of resilience, where climate change is being experienced now, and where many of the systemic approaches that Harry referred to and you added on to are coming together. So now I'd like to turn it to Vanessa. And Vanessa, your question is about transformation, and what do you mean by it? What do we mean by it when we talk about it? It's used a lot these days. Over to you.
I only took my job because the word transformation was in it. Really appreciate the question. It's really a pleasure to be here today. And I agree that this is probably the most beautiful season. Anyway, I wanted to put a preamble on my response to transformation. And that's basically, given what has been said before already this morning, in Agra, we talk a lot about urgency. We talk about the timelines that we have all given for ourselves, the commitments that we have all made. We meaning African countries, we meaning development partners, we meaning implementers. We have all made significant commitments towards the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, which are 7 harvests away. And I'm counting a harvest a year. Some countries have, 2 or 3, but let's just go for the average single planting season and harvest, as the majority of Africa is still in that environment. 7 harvests away. And this is something, why are you calling me a force of nature? Because I harass you every day to say, what are we doing for this planting season? And so I want to talk about transformation in the context of 7 harvests away from the commitments we have all made. And some of the commitments we have made and that Agra continues to measure also have to do with African country and government commitments to 10% of budget contributing to the agricultural sector, right? We're talking about CADP and Malabo declarations. And I bring that up also not to be a downer, but because we all know the evidence is not there, that the amount of commitment and funding, and you all know this, towards that transformation agenda requires a real concerted and coordinated effort. And so within Agra, we have, we were created, we're an African organization. Let me state the beginning part of this. I am the only American on staff at Agra. In case you're wondering why I'm here, my rest of my colleagues are in the field running around. It's planting season, right? So the Agra approach and strategic objectives have just been refreshed for the next 5 years. So we're working now on a 2027 strategic agenda. And, we convene every year in September, as many of you know and have participated, to review and take stock of how we're delivering on those commitments. Are we making the transformations we need to make? Are we becoming more climate smart? Are we more resilient? Are we delivering technologies to the last mile? So I've been evolving my recipe for transformation over the last 5 years that I've been at Agra. Now I have a 7-part recipe. The dosage has yet to be fully calibrated. In my opinion, they don't have equal doses, all 7 parts. But the first, and this is why you're all here, which is evidence-based solutions, right? A lot of people go out and make recommendations without evidence, and Colorado knows this very well. A lot of us see extension delivery services when they're happening without the latest innovations and technologies. And so evidence-based solutions is a critical component of that transformation agenda, as you all know. And I was making a list because you listed thousands of innovations. And I was thinking, for us, we've focused on ingredient number 2 on my agenda of transformation agenda here is scale for impact of innovations. We want them to reach scale. And those solutions and scaling are so important. In agro, we measure scale in a few different ways, and systems is a key part of it, but we also want to touch millions of smallholder farmers. And so reaching 12 million smallholder farmers for us over the last 5 years was not too many, it was many too few. That was direct impact, and we estimate that about 25 million were reached indirectly, still too few, right? On the continent, the number of farmers who need these innovations, by our estimate, is actually about 75 million smallholder farmers. And so if we're reaching 12 million in the 12 countries that we've focused in, still far too few. The third ingredient in this recipe is partnerships. All of you have mentioned it today. But what kind of partnerships, right? Are we measuring those partnerships? Are we leveraging and are we coordinating? Are we catalyzing additionality through those partnerships? And so that comes to the quality and the impact. And the fourth ingredient, which should have been the first, is local ownership. Who owns those technologies? Who owns the solutions that we're scaling out? Have we really transferred something which is desirable, right? That we talk about the right varieties, which are climate resilient, but many of us have seen that they might not taste the right way for farmers to want to make food out of them, or they might not be the right color for the market to buy them. And so this science has to be accelerated. But the ownership is so critical. And local ownership, we mean farmers, we mean small SMEs, we mean local governments. And the fifth I've mentioned already, which is about coordination, but we've really been expanding coordination through platforms. And the role of coordination, I realized many people focus on coordination to coordinate. Our focus on coordination is for advocacy, is for dialogue. The coordination isn't to talk amongst ourselves. And we hope that all of the technologies and coordinated efforts here get to be used to generate more voice. And this brings me to the sixth ingredient, which again, I think should be first. So this is a real challenge, and that's inclusivity. And we can't talk about transformation if we don't include women, if we don't include youth, if we don't talk about the next generation who is already eager to be on the front lines combating the effects of climate change. And so this inclusivity agenda is actually how we measure ultimately, and hopefully this inclusivity isn't just, oh yeah, we reached out to the women, they just didn't show up, right? That doesn't work, as we know. And so we've been much more focused on making sure that inclusivity results in voice, results in adoption. And so that brings me back to where I started, which is measurement. If we're not actually able to measure it, did it happen, right? So we've been very harsh critics of ourselves, and many other people have happily joined criticizing us. You probably have read some of those criticisms, but the reason that we're so critical of ourselves, and others are too, is because of the ambition to have impact at scale. And so we have done 8,000 smallholder farmer surveys across about 7 countries each year over the last 4 years to check, are the yields coming through, in which crops and which areas are people adopting new technologies? If so, where are they buying them from? What level of access to farmers markets, finance are being reached? Are governments actually following through on adopting and implementing the policy changes that they've committed to? And are those aligned to the communities that they're serving? So this is a tall order. I think a 7-part recipe is it should be manageable, and yet it continues to be a challenge. So back to 7 harvests. Let's see what we can do together.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. And our time is up, but I just want to take a moment and say that, Vanessa laid out a very compelling set of things to keep in mind. Vanessa, you flagged evidence-based solutions and noted that that's especially relevant for the group gathered here. Same thing really for partnership. And I come back to Simon's comments, the critical role of our partners in the national programs, the private sector, And then also this idea of coordination via platforms. That's another space where I think this community gathered here would a seat at that table alongside our friends at Cal Rho and elsewhere. I think we'd like to develop that and take it forward. The thing that that I didn't hear as much in your 7, but I think speaks back to our first 2 speakers is one, the policy piece, which is a huge factor in all of these that Simon raised, and then the climate change specifically. And of course, we've already said that we're working in an area where climate change is happening now. But Anne pointed out, there's lots of uncertainty, and maybe some areas around things like temperatures where it's less uncertain in terms of what directions we're headed. So, and of course, we heard the permanent secretary talk about this morning. So, but I don't think either of those. I think the challenge we have in the next couple of days is to think about those 2 things in this really dynamic, impactful approach. Because at the end of the day, that's what we get our money for. Not just to generate the solutions or do this or that, but to actually change lives. And to do that, to change the outcomes on the ground, we need to integrate what we heard from our 3 speakers here today, but in this way that takes a system and then takes it apart into the component pieces that critically have to connect to make the impact on the ground. So we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Unless does any of you want to come back in with some? Yeah, of course. I don't mean, I know I'm taking up a lot of airtime.
Vanessa mentioned youth, and I just think the importance of that and youth and innovation and empowering youth, because we're not going to get there without that. And I think it's same with gender, and measuring both the youth and the gender aspect is really critical in everything that we're doing. And it's sometimes we don't mention it, it gets lost. So thanks for mentioning it. That would be my one.
Thank you, Vanessa, for bringing in one of the pillars of inclusiveness. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Innovation Lab for Crop Improvement at Cornell University. They have supported CARO to be able to establish a platform for the forgotten farmers. 15% of the farmers in the rural areas are living with some form of disability. So CARO is implementing a platform that will give voice to the forgotten farmers. Just very quickly to mention, these are farmers living with disability, the youth, women, farmers living with the HIV/AIDS, and farmers or caregivers with the infants of less than 60 months. So we are really very grateful, and there's a lot for us to be able to learn in the systems approach, because this is a public and private sector engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Oops, sorry. Thank you, Simon. I want to give Vanessa the last word. Several of us have responded to you. You flagged inclusion. Thank you, Simon, for bringing another dimension of that to the table.
Great, thank you. I think I should share my 40 slides, which answered this question in more detail, but I wanted to underscore, I had the opportunity to sit in for Dr. Agnes Kalibata in a number of climate-specific focused platforms. And as you all know, Agnes was the global food systems summit special envoy to the UN. And the reason for that, and the reason I think that this is such a critical point to make, is that we know food and agriculture globally are delivering 35% of the emissions that we're still producing towards climate change. And if we don't change behavior in a completely different, much more radical and aggressive and measured approach, we are not going to actually curb the trajectory of overshooting 1.5 degrees. And so I didn't start with that because I figured Anne would really address it. But I have become the #1 most vocal person I ever met, and that's a problem. But on this agenda, and which is really measuring the impacts and the emissions of all the practices that we're we're all recommending and taking much more aggressive steps to mitigate climate change. Thanks.
Thank you, Vanessa. And I just want to say that is a tremendous setup and segue into the next two sessions where we're really going to dig in. So let's take about 15 minutes for coffee break now, back at 10 minutes after 11. Thank you all. Will you join me in thanking our panel?
From the innovation labs and their partners. Jerry is the Deputy Director for USAID's Center for Agriculture and works to develop innovative and sustainable strategies for smallholder farmers around the world. He earned bachelor degrees in soil science and philosophy, and then a PhD in soil science at Washington State University. Jerry has studied native grasslands and farming systems, including no-till, perennial, organic, and integrated systems. His work in soil science and perennial-based farming systems has been highlighted in documentary films, National Geographic, Scientific American, Science and Nature. Thank you so much, Jerry. You're perfect to be moderating these panels. Please come up. And I'd also like to invite all of the panelists from this first panel to come up as well.
Thanks, Aaron. Good morning, everyone. Great to be here talking about this very important topic in such a beautiful setting. We have two panels right next to each other, one on mitigation, this panel, and adaptation in the next one. But I think you'll find, as we heard from the previous speakers, that these are intertwined topics. And as many reports coming out recently on agricultural productivity in Africa have pointed out, ag productivity growth is very much linked to both mitigation and adaptation here. So although we're talking about them slightly separate, we do know that they're intertwined. And fortunately, most of the innovations, most of the practices that improve agricultural productivity also mean that the farm is better adapted to climate change, but also, very importantly, leads to benefits on the mitigation side, reducing the overall greenhouse gas emission load, and especially for farming systems here in Africa, reducing the emissions intensity. So as reports have pointed out, Sub-Saharan Africa is only responsible for about 2% of total greenhouse gas emissions around the world. But smallholder farmers have some of the highest greenhouse gas emission intensities per unit produced. In other words, a liter of milk produced here emits far more greenhouse gas emissions than in many other parts of the world. There's a tremendous opportunity there on the mitigation side. As was pointed out in the previous panel, the word urgency comes up. We need to act very quickly, which means that we also need to be very smart, evidence-based, using our investments wisely. So that's going to be the topic of the next couple of panels, with this one more focused on the mitigation side. And I'm really happy to have these three panelists on here. Lots of expertise across Sub-Saharan Africa, many years grappling with these issues. First, Evan Gervets. He leads the Climate Smart Technology and Practices for the Alliance for Biodiversity International and CIOT. I just had the pleasure of seeing some of Evan's work on the ground in Malawi and Zambia a couple of weeks ago, working on climate information services for smallholder farmers, helping them be better prepared, better informed to meet the challenges. Sophia Tesfazion is the Director of Resource Mobilization for the African Agricultural Technology Foundation, a great long-term partner of USAID, working on a wide range of issues from policy to markets, and really grappling with these issues of how to get technologies out to farmers. And then we have Edward Adun, who's with the Current and Emerging Threats, the Crops Innovation Lab. They've been looking at a range of innovative approaches to dealing with pests and disease and other threats to cropping systems. They've taken quite a focal position on youth, including youth in their programming and on scaling. So I think we'll hear, a few themes about inclusiveness, about information, evidence-based decision-making, and so on. So with that, I'm going to cut my remarks short because, as has been pointed out, we're a little bit behind time, but to give as much time to our guests as possible, I'll just turn it over to Evan first, who has some slides to show. And then following that, I'll pose some questions to him, and then on to Sophia and Edward. I should say I gave their great backgrounds very short shrift out of time consciousness, but you can look at their rich biographies online. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jerry, and great to be here today. Welcome. Actually, this is my home here in Nairobi, so it's great to welcome you all here. I've been here for about the last 10 years, leading our climate action program in Africa at the Alliance of Biodiversity International in CIAT, and now part of the CGIAR and one CGIAR effort going forward. I'm also the co-lead for the Eastern and Southern Africa Regional Integrated Initiative of the one CGIAR that we call Ukama Ustawi. And today, happy to talk with you about some of the work that we've been doing and to give you sort of some context from my perspective of here in Africa on climate smart agriculture in Africa and thinking about mitigation, but also adaptation and the co-benefits that can come from them together in the same technologies that we're delivering to farmers on the ground. And so as we think about these issues around climate coming together, I wanted to start with something that Jerry mentioned, which is really about how much emissions are coming from Africa versus the rest of the world. And just to put that in context that we start, that really the amount of emissions coming here from Africa is so much smaller, 20 times greater in the US than in Africa per capita. So just say that that's sort of the context that we're starting with here. Not to say that it's not an important issue we should be dealing with. I just wanted to put that out as the context again, that we're thinking about farmers who on a day-to-day basis really probably are thinking about the risks on the ground to them. And I do want to come back to that also in this. And those issues of getting their crop yields, their productivity for that given year, and some of these other issues is something that we see how we can bring that in to the technologies that we're delivering to them so that they can improve their productivity, their resilience, and also be helping to solve the global challenge that we have around mitigation of climate. So starting with that, and then as we think about climate smart agriculture, we can think about it as having these three components of increasing productivity, improving resilience, and addressing the mitigation challenge that climate change poses for us. And so as we think about this generally of climate smart agriculture, we can say that really this is context specific in some ways. So for example, down in the lower left-hand corner, you can see that productivity and resilience could be prioritized over mitigation, for example, in some places. In the middle on the bottom, mitigation may be a bigger issue in some systems. Maybe we're thinking about rice systems in parts of the world or other livestock systems. And then D, we have resilience as being maybe the big issue in some places where that's the main priority of what we should be looking at. And we can be thinking about how this can sort of touch down on the ground in certain places. For example, I'm just putting this up as something that I'm thinking about, that in Western Kenya, we might think more about productivity, but also resilience, and mitigation is a bit smaller just because of the context that we have here that we're starting with in Africa. And if we think in the arid and semi-arid lands here in Kenya, resilience may be the biggest issue that we're thinking about as we think about these climate challenges here. So again, I wanted to put that context for how we're thinking about bringing mitigation in as a co-benefit along with adaptation and productivity goals that we're looking to get. But let's focus in on mitigation, since that's the panel here, and it is something important for us to think about. And as we heard earlier, I think it was Vanessa and we've heard others mention that agriculture is still a big part of the problem of climate change. It's certainly a big emitter globally. And if you look here in Kenya, it represents almost 60% of emissions coming from all sectors in Kenya. So if we're talking about mitigation, agriculture is definitely important here in Kenya. And then to unpack this a little bit more, to say now, really, where is this coming from here in Kenya? And so this is through some work that we did on profiling climate smart agriculture in Kenya. And as we unpack this, I want to show sort of three key numbers here on this. As we unpack that 58% that agriculture contributes to greenhouse gas emissions in Kenya, we can see that 96%, over 96% comes from the livestock sector. So if we're talking about emissions in Kenya and we're talking about agriculture, we're very much talking about livestock here. And then the two places where this comes from really is the manure left on pastures, that's about 37% there, and then enteric fermentation coming from livestock, and that's almost 56%. So we're talking about sort of improving, let's say, digestion and nutrition of cows, increasing productivity, I would say, in some ways. And really that issue of greenhouse gas emission intensity that Jerry was mentioning comes in right here, that these are some of the most intense systems in terms of per amount of food produced. There's a lot of greenhouse gas emissions that are coming from this. And then second, the manure left on pastures, how we manage the manure there. What are some of the opportunities? I'll think about biodigesters and different kinds of ways that manure can be used or back into mixed farming systems and into the soil and these kind of ways. So here's some of the big areas that we see the mitigation challenge here in Kenya. And I would say that in general, it's safe to say that in general across Africa, these are the same kind of challenges that we see here. So I did want to come back to the risks. I think this is really important as we think about how we address these issues, that for me, when I deal with a farmer on a day-to-day basis, I would tend to say that these are the issues that they think about when they think about climate. They don't think so much about the greenhouse gas emissions. And so some recent work that we've done is to look globally and then zoom in here in Kenya, looking historically now and say, what are the key climate risks that farmers are dealing with? What are those key climate hazards that farmers are dealing with on their farm in a specific place? And so that can be categorized by the map that we see here. And so let me start in the yellow areas. And these are really the drier areas of Kenya here, the pastoral lands. And that's represented, sorry, it's hard to see, but by the graph on the right-hand side. And just to tell you that the yellow color mostly refers to dry conditions with thermal stress. So not just that it's dry, but also that it's very hot and they're dealing with that thermal stress also. And so those are some of the big issues that we see in those pastoral lands, and certainly, drought being a part of that. And those orange areas, then, as we get into where a bit more of the higher productivity areas, this would be getting into the highland perennial areas, especially there. And those areas are dealing more with climate variability leading to drought. So less the high temperatures that they're dealing with there, but more the climate variability and the drought issues that are coming in there. And then we can go into the mixed maize areas, and these are similar. Also, we start dealing with even more so climate variability coming in a stronger way that we see the onset of the rains, dry periods during the growing season as being some of the key hazards that we see coming up. And then the same thing as you go more into Western Kenya, sort of drought becomes less of an issue, but you get more of the climate variability as being the issues. And so one of the big points here is that, climate change certainly is not the same everywhere. And what constitutes climate smart agriculture is not the same everywhere, because it's very much about seeing what those hazards are, what those risks are, and identifying the interventions that can go with them from the risk and adaptation standpoint. And at the same time, looking at where the greenhouse gas is coming from and identifying the interventions to address those specific sources of greenhouse gases. So putting these together is what we're thinking about with climate smart agriculture, in addition to productivity and working on hitting these three targets to provide for the farmers there on the ground and from the perspective they have, which I would say is really managing the climate risks they see, and then seeing how we can bring in the greenhouse gas mitigation as co-benefits in the technologies. I think there's lots of opportunities for that I'll get to here. So what I want to show you next is I showed you some results in Kenya of some work we did in profiling climate smart agriculture. We've developed what we call climate smart agriculture country profiles for over 30 countries globally, over 15 of those in Africa. And we did a synthesis analysis across all these countries of these assessments that we did, looking at adaptation, mitigation, and productivity. And so what I want to show is some of the results of that came out of this synthesis report here. And so there's a lot in here. I want to focus in on some of the technologies that were identified globally as we think about climate smart agriculture across these 30 countries. And so what constitutes climate smart agriculture is represented in this sort of graph that I have here. And I want to point out some things in the next set of slides. So first, that if you look at sort of the two big areas that came out, and I'm not going to say this is the majority, but as far as consolidated areas, water management and crop tolerance to stress are two of the key areas that came out, each of them 14% of sort of all the technologies that were looked at for being climate smart. So that gives you some context of where we're starting from. That water management is very important. And then stress and how we can develop crops that are tolerant to stress is one of the key kinds of technologies that we can be using and things that have been identified. Now we need to make sure we can deliver these, as we've talked about, scale them out, and these type of things need to be addressed. But from the sort of expert assessment and the data that's there, these came out top. But also we can say that there's many others that are here. And as we start putting together different pieces here, we see that intercropping and crop rotation also about 14%. So a big part of this also on these kind of agronomic approaches. We can then add to that and see that fertilizer management and organic inputs, another 13% of what constitutes climate smart agriculture here. And then even adding to that, we can put conservation agriculture, crop rotation, and mulching in here, and see that as we put all these together, around 36% of the practices that were looked at fall here in these kind of agronomic, fertilizer management, crop rotation, soil management practices. And what I'd say is that we really see, I'd see a lot of opportunity here for this mitigation and adaptation co-benefits. And I'll say there's certainly a lot of science that needs to be done around soil carbon and how we can keep carbon in the soil, the role of conservation agriculture, et cetera. But just to say that I think this is an area where I see a lot of opportunity and discussion around how we can be bringing together mitigation and adaptation together and be working with farmers on, for example, improving their soils, getting more organic carbon in there, improving soil water holding capacity that can help with resilience and adaptation, and at the same time how we can be seeing how that can potentially and in the right places contribute to mitigation. Okay, so now moving on, livestock, certainly another important area that we see also. And so this pops out in some different areas. It's probably, actually, I think it should say 8%, sorry, it's a mistake, instead of 6% up there. We have diet management, we have grazing management, we have pasture management, we have disease management. These are all important areas that need to contribute to climate smart agriculture. And again, a big opportunity, I think even bigger opportunity here for mitigation and adaptation co-benefits, that if we can improve the nutrition and the diets of livestock, they can increase their productivity and help to reduce their greenhouse gas emission intensity. And going back to say that what I've seen from the data is one of the biggest greenhouse gas emitters per unit of food that's produced is in these livestock systems here in East Africa in particular. And so addressing that from the nutrition standpoint, I think is one big one, in addition to the other kinds of interventions, including improved breed, the genetics of breeds, disease management, and pasture management, grazing management, et cetera. And then also diversification, and I guess I could say agroecological approaches. I wanted to put that in here just to say that this does include these kind of agroecological approaches, tree management, agroforestry, boundary planning, also the kind of things that come up. And again, an opportunity for adaptation and mitigation co-benefits to come in together through climate smart agriculture here. So just to wrap up, to say a few comments about Africa in particular, I presented some here. It's globally, but it very much relates and it draws heavily. More than half of those studies came from Africa. I think that is very relevant, what was just presented there, to Africa and here in the East African context in particular. But in particular in Africa, some of the things that we saw coming out even more from when we looked deeper into these studies for Africa is that contouring, agroforestry, and other land management practices are actually more commonly used here in the region than other regions globally. So that bubbles up a bit more. Disease management and livestock genetic improvement were also more commonly identified in Africa than other places in the world as being important for climate smart agriculture. And I think that comes both on the adaptation and the mitigation side that can contribute to. Risk management technologies, which globally were only about 3% of the technologies that were identified, came up much more commonly in Africa, and especially climate information services, the kind of thing that Jerry was referring to, how we can deliver this kind of information to farmers, for example, over mobile phones, and microinsurance, these kind of risk management solutions that can be delivered to farmers. This was identified more in Africa than other places. And then just to highlight that digital services, I think, has a big opportunity, again, as Jerry was mentioning, for delivering innovations or at least information to farmers at scale, to link them to the service providers that they would need to get the inputs for the drought or stress tolerant crops, et cetera. So with that, I want to say thank you. I think we really need to look at the context there for climate. Where is mitigation? Where the greenhouse gas is coming from to design our mitigation interventions? Also look at, from the farmer's perspective, the risks that they're dealing with, how we can be putting these together into innovations that can address both of these at the same time. And I think a lot of opportunity for that. So look forward to this discussion today, and thanks for the time.
Thanks so much, Evan. And let's just roll right into Sophia's discussion and hear from her about how her team has been grappling with these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry, and hi, everybody. My name is Sofia Tesfatsyan, and I've also been here 15 years in various sectors, and the last 6 or 7 in agriculture. My slides are being pulled up, but AATF, African Agriculture Technology Foundation, is focused on technology transfer. So really focused on getting technologies out to the end users, which is a challenge. And we are an African organization under the working under the platforms of Malabo Declaration, AU Agenda 2063, etc. And we work with partners and have a strong focus on public-private partnerships in our interventions. So we just launched our new strategy last week in Addis, which is really impact, scaling for impact. And this is just a snapshot of our achievements from the last 5 years. We also want to reach more farmers. We reached around 4 million with technologies, adoption, and also we're tracking the income the farmers receive with those technologies. So we are in 24 countries, but deep presence in around 5 to 7. So our new objectives, they're building on the last strategy, but it's really to diversify agriculture technologies in the region and the next generation, looking at the sustainability and that the technologies we work on today actually can meet the challenges of the future, but accelerate commercialization of technologies and scaling, as well as looking at the enabling environment, both for technology uptake, but also for efficient markets. So now to the topics, just so we are clear on the context for Africa. We all know that Africa contributes very little to the emissions, but is very much affected by the impact of climate change. We also know that Africa's focus is actually on adaptation. We also know that the global climate finance is focused on mitigation. So there is a disconnect in that sense. Africa's climate finance gap will grow to 3 trillion by 2030. And it's only receiving 10% of what it needs, which is around 5.5% of the global total climate finance. And the focus or the climate action and finance is even unevenly distributed. So it's around 10 countries in the region with that focus. So since the global climate finance is focused on mitigation, that whole linkage and the balance and the system approach between mitigation and adaptation is critical. So key questions is, how can mitigation finance support resilience, adaptation, and sustainable development? And what are the capacities needed in Africa to do that? So it's often very much separated. So how do we link those capacities together, both from finance to implementation? So I just want to give an example. It's a new project, but it's interesting in the sense that how it has a system approach. So it's really to transfer technology of bio-based technologies, looking at the local biomass and the needs and context of specific countries. We heard that it's very specific in terms of the country and the specific region, but also looking at how these can be developed and deployed, looking at sustainable business models. So this includes several different technologies. There has been a list, it's being narrowed, it's being tested. And it also includes hands-on business support to actually make them viable. And then the whole idea is to have them scaled for other, to have the marketable products being scaled up elsewhere, And it's really a collaboration between academia, government, industry, and society at large. So it's focused on the forage agri-food system to improve the performance in terms of environment, social, and economic, and to have the farmers diversify and sustainably produce higher value bio-based products and energy. So as I said, it's a big partnership, and there are 8 testing sites. So this is in Uganda, Ghana, Ivory Coast, and Senegal. And ATF's role in this is to validate these technologies, to look at how relevant are for the specific context. So we know the context in the different countries and work with the system there in terms of the research institutes, the private sector, etc., to do the benefit analysis, looking at social impact, cultural acceptance, economic, etc., and to see if there's a business case. But also looking at the policy. So mapping the policy environment in this different context and looking at the issues, doing policy briefs for advocacy and intervention. So in the sense, it's a mitigation focused project, but the resilience is built and the improved economic impact increase the resilience and adaptation for the shocks. And what we're seeing is that there's a huge interest in these technologies. And what we deal with at ATF every day is, but how viable are they and what's the return and the time for that? So it's really the resources needed and the capacity building and awareness about these technologies, the business incubation, and looking at the return on investment, the time it takes for even the policy environment, etc. So these are common challenges with technology transfer, but these are the trade-offs. So in conclusion, yeah, there is opportunity for mitigation and adaptation programming and implementation, and its investments. We would argue that it could be focused on both. But of course, there's a huge need for capacity building in terms of circular economy, and the investments are usually focused on having those separate. And of course, it needs to be transdisciplinary. So the Bio for Africa project really involves science, business, policy, and also looks at resilience, adaptation, and the women empowerment and entrepreneurship. So I'll end there. That's my 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sophia. And now with Edward coming to us from Penn State University. Thanks.
Hello. Yeah, I like this better. My name is Edward Amoa. I'm from Ghana. I work with the Penn State Plant Village Lab, with the current Future Innovation Lab for current and emerging threats to crops. So we've heard a lot about different threats that are affecting crops, and we've talked a lot about climate change and how that's going to impact not only crops today, but crops in the future. And I think it's important that not only do we think about how do we address the issues of today, but how can we plan for the issues of tomorrow and ensure that food production on the continent can not only adapt to the current threats, but it's actually resilient for the upcoming and the climate change. We're expecting more erratic rain patterns. We're expecting more intense droughts. So how can we ensure that farmers have the tools and the knowledge to be able to adapt to these conditions? So we know that we are definitely on the line to get to above 1.5 degrees Celsius, maybe 2, maybe 3. But the take-home message is that we are not doing enough. We had the Paris Agreement, a lot of countries with all our climate mitigation goals, and yet the needle, so to speak, has not really moved down. We're still on the path of massive emissions. And so we need sequestration at scale, not just 1 million tons, but we need a lot, billions of tons being sequestered a year. IPCC and some other studies have shown that globally there's about almost 40 billion tons of emissions annually. And by 2050, we need to be net zero. And then afterwards, we need to be sequestering 10 billion tons of carbon every year in order to stay below the 2 degrees Celsius. So there's a massive need for sequestration and mitigation efforts. So how can we get that? So our approach to this is a simple approach, but very powerful. It's called the AI-powered carbon cubes. And there is a principle in physics and also really in computer engineering. I had my undergrad in computer engineering, and in tech, there's this idea of simplicity and also just always trying to abstract. And so how can you take what electrical engineers have developed as a computer engineer and develop a system without even knowing the underlying infrastructure? I just understand that this is how the CPU works. And so how can I optimize my solution for it? And the same thing happens with the computer scientists. They don't even know what the computer engineer did. Some do, some don't, some do not. But this principle of abstraction. And then also in the physics, there's this sort of first principle. So what is the fundamental truth to the problem? Well, the fundamental truth of the problem of climate change is that there's a huge amount of emissions that we need to reduce, right? So how can we get that? We've had talks from our speakers talking about how agriculture is a big part of it, and that is true. So that means that we have the opportunity to actually use agriculture as an avenue, not only to reduce emissions from agriculture, but actually reverse and absorb emissions from other sectors. And there's a principle in ecology, is just getting my PhD in ecology, we talk about co-benefits. And so it's not always take and give relationships in nature. Sometimes building a system and having an underlying understanding of the system, you can actually build a system so that you have multiple benefits. And so it doesn't always have to be just climate mitigation, but it can also be climate mitigation, adaptation, increasing food security, giving resilience to the farmer. You can have all these in one package, disease protection and all that, when you think about sort of this principle of co-benefits. So that's kind of what we're trying to get here. So we have trees that are planted on the borders of the farm, and that protects the farms from the high effects of climate change, from wind and heat. There are studies that have shown that trees on the farm reduces the heat on the farm, which is important. But also, we also apply biochar, which is a pyrolyzed biomass into the soil, which increases the water holding capacity of the soil, and it can also help with nutrient retention. And so in a way, not only are we helping with water retention, which is important for climate resilience, but we are also helping the farmers with nutrient retention, which is, again, you can always come up with solutions that have a lot of co-benefit, and that's kind of the principle that we using. So now we have a system that we know works. It's low scale, it's simple. We've abstracted the system. It's based on first principle. So how can we scale it? And so we're working with the communities. We have nursery. We're working with the KFS and other local stakeholders, and we have nurseries all over the country. And as of today, we've distributed over 1 million seedlings to farmers across Kenya and Burkina Faso. So over 1 million trees have been planted. Another thing that we have learned is that, it's hard to centralize all your operations. So you're working with our most important stakeholder, the farmers themselves. These are the most important partners, and our farmers are also helping us with distributed network of nurseries to help us rapidly keep on scaling our seedling distribution networks. Through our amazing Plants Village Dream team. And so you might have the question, how do we reach all these farmers? How do we educate these farmers? is because we work with, again, with our local partners in Moore University and students from all across the country to coordinate the distribution, the education of farmers, the monitoring on the farms, and all that is done with our team here on the ground. Over 100 Dream Team extension officers across the country working closely with farmers. And so in the image over there, you can see some of our youth members working directly with farmers and teaching them how to plant the trees. You can see in the other image, some of our team members distributing trees, and another image showing the trees as they are growing on the farms, and another image again showing trainings sessions happen. And this is happening every day, every week of the year, all across the country. So one of the big challenge of tree planting, I don't know if you've heard it in the news, but is that everybody is planting trees, but no one is actually looking at how well the trees are doing. It's like, how do you know how the trees are doing? There are some studies in Sri Lanka, for example, where after 5 years, when they look back at the tree planting efforts, only the survival rate was about less than 10% for about 75% of the sites where they planted trees. And so, you know, everybody's planting trees, but nobody is paying attention to how well these trees are doing. And so as part of my dissertation, I won the Elon Musk Carbon X Prize removal, $100,000 to develop monitoring, reporting, and verification system for growing trees. And basically what this is it will enable us to work directly with our farmers to know exactly how well our trees are doing in the field at any point in time. Now, this image that you see here is our platform, the Plant Village platform, Ag Observatory, and this is the panel for tree monitoring. And the image you see of the tree is actually an actual picture of a tree that we have planted with a farmer. And then a couple of years later, I just looked at the panel about a week before this presentation to just take the picture. And so I haven't been to this farm, but I know how well these trees are doing. And that's the idea of what we're developing. And not only that, we are also including, we are bringing artificial intelligence to empower our farmers so that we can do this monitoring system accurately with high accuracy. And that's, again, part of my dissertation, where I've developed an AI system that enables the farmers, just by taking pictures of the trees on their farm, we can accurately estimate the biomass of the trees, and by so also understand how much carbon those trees have sequestered. So now imagine this, 100,000 million farmers all over the world planting trees, using distributed networks of tree nurseries, using local extension offices in country to deliver these trees to the farmers. And not only that, we've developed a platform that enabled us to know exactly how many trees have been planted, exactly how well those trees are doing, and exactly how much carbon we have sequestered. This is the kind of technology that we need to get to the scale that we need to get to. Now, just to give you an example of why these kinds of platform technology is important, today, if you think about the biggest taxi company in the world, it's Uber. If you think about the biggest hotel chain in the world, it's Airbnb. Why are these platforms so impactful? It's because they have a platform that enable a common car owner or a regular house owner to become a hotel manager or a taxi driver. And this is the kind of technology that we want to bring with smallholder farmers. Using the platform that we have developed, it empower every single farmer with the tool set to be able to plant and grow trees, and they can measure exactly how much CO2 they are sequestering with high accuracy. And this is as a part of a paper that will be published this year, hopefully. So what's the path to scaling? Again, I think the speaker before spoke about progress after program or something. Yes. Progress beyond program. Yes. So that's why everyone here is so critical to success, because we are working with an amazing network of people, all and the missions and all the innovation lab in multiple different countries this is how we can what okay, what we have learned, what we have developed can be used by other innovation labs. What they have learned, we can learn. In this case, we have learned and we've developed a platform that can really scale solutions and sharing it with other innovation labs and working together with other innovation labs, we can reach the millions and the billions that we need to get to and in order to address climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Yeah, that issue of scaling and the topic of youth has come up several times. And of course, with the urgency of the issue, you know, and all hands on deck efforts needed. Can you just say a few words about how you all have worked to mobilize the youth to achieve what you're describing? Thank you.
Yeah, so the innovation lab that we've been working with, we've always been working with youth from the beginning. And so the Plant Village Dream team, I think was established in 2019, maybe 2016. But anyway, we work closely with farmers every day. About 80% of our employees are directly in the field with farmers. And so farmers are the most important stakeholders that we learn from and we also do research with. And the thing is, the youth that we work with, they're really good at being able to understand farmers and also really good at being able to transfer knowledge to farmers. So there's really no other better way to do it.
Okay, thanks. Evan, did you want to say? It looked like you wanted to say a few words.
If you were asking all of us, I'm happy to address also. Or
Excellent, excellent. Yeah.
You just say that I think the youth are incredibly important, and I think we see, I mean, in Kenya and Africa in particular, the aging farmer is a challenge, and who's going to be the future farmer that continues as these farmers get older. One thing that we're looking to do is to look at the role of gamification, and we're working with a video game developer here in Nairobi called Usiku Games. They call themselves Africa's first social impact gaming studio, and developing a game that we're just actually last week tested it at Moronga University with students there to see how when they play this game, are they learning more about conservation agriculture? That was the first sort of storyline that we were playing in here. And we have ambitions for how this could be scaled out in different ways, including, for example, pairing with like TV shows where you could have it more on the mass media, or taking it out to farmers on tablets where they themselves, through something like Kuzabu Biashara or companies like that, to get to farmers. So that's one. The other is, I think we need to make agriculture, you know, something that's attractive from a business standpoint, and that they see the economic, the business entrepreneurial value in it. And so we're running some SME accelerator programs here in the region, targeting specific climate smart agriculture technologies that need to be scaled out. So these SMEs need to be engaged in delivering these technologies, and then targeting businesses, SMEs that are run by youth and by women to be in the acceleration program. And so to be fostering that economic development and making agriculture exciting from that perspective, rather than it just being something that's drudgery on the farm.
All right, thanks, Sam. Sophia, yeah.
Yeah, so similar fashion. So it's really to show the economic value of agriculture and technology in our context and innovation. So we really focus on entrepreneurship. And also when we do the demos of technologies in the communities or in the, to really find youth champions that can actually spread, if they're convinced, they can spread it to the rest of the farmer group, and they can even organize the group so it becomes more economic benefit. If an investor wants to invest in a technology, it's all about aggregation. So youth can also have a real good role in aggregation. And we also looking to actually partner with American universities in terms of acceleration programs and entrepreneurship. So those are new areas, or to build on what we're doing, but having more of a focus on entrepreneurship.
All right, thanks very much. Somewhat as a segue to the next panel, maybe I'll go back to Evan. And, you know, I saw some of your climate service promotion out in the field a couple of weeks ago in Malawi. And in Zambia. And, that was in response, not, there was a lot of talk earlier about drought, but some of the impacts that we saw on that trip in Southern Africa were from flooding and excessive rains. So it's hard to know how to be best prepared if you don't know if it's going to be a drought or flooding. So Evan, I just wonder if you could say a bit about how climate services, how you see climate services as maybe providing not just greater adaptation, but, on that productivity frontier, helping on the mitigation side as well. Here.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think these kind of digital advisory services is a big opportunity here in Africa as digital penetration increases rapidly across the continent, especially here in East Africa and Kenya in particular. I think I would go back to, we're looking at specific technologies and how we deliver those is where it is to get the information to farmers in terms of what they can do for their place and identify these technologies. For example, it could be the example of planting more trees and how that can come in and identifying some work that colleagues of mine are doing that could even relate to work you're doing is to identify what's the most appropriate tree species for this place if I want to plant it here for the kind of benefits that I want to get. So helping to target the right kind of species. I think in general, a lot of what I think about for these digital services is to tailor a technology to a very specific context, as in we know where a farmer is on the ground. We can get some information from satellite imagery from farmers giving information. We can engage them in two-way communication in digital services, find out about what they're doing, and then best target those. So it could be promoting conservation agriculture that could have some mitigation co-benefits. It could be finding out that they're a livestock keeper and we could be getting improved forages to them to increase their productivity. And also that would help with the mitigation, or it could be around targeting fertilizer recommendations to them so that we know on the ground this fertilizer is going to be best used there and help increase the productivity and have the mitigation co-benefits that can come to that. But I think really tailoring the innovation to the place on the ground for the farmer and then being able to link them to the service that to actually get what they need, be it a seedling, be it the right kind of fertilizer blend, be it the right kind of input that they would need as part of a conservation agriculture or integrated soil fertility management intervention.
Right. That's really great. Thanks so much. And thanks to all three of you. Oh, Edward, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so you talked a lot about, in context, response to the farmer. I think it's called precision agriculture is what it's called. And it's really important for farmers because we know that, there are so many different kinds of soil. A lot of farmers are experiencing different kinds of rain patterns and so on, growing different crops. Now, the issue that we have at the moment, we don't have enough people to go around telling every single farmer, this is what you need and this is what you need to do. So that's where we think artificial intelligence, especially for my research, comes in. It's like, how can we bring artificial intelligence into this space to learn and then be able to give the farmers the recommendation that they actually need? But not only that, how can we actually build the infrastructure that is required so that as the farmers are getting these recommendations, they can actually get the tools and the things that they need? Because what's the point of telling the farmer, oh, you're not going to get a rain for 2 weeks and you should irrigate your farm, but then the farmer doesn't have access to capital to get irrigation tools or other things. And so then it's just a message that has no effect. So I think holistic approach to it, and also looking into how we can use technology to help rapidly scale solutions. So first, find a solution that works in the local context, and then how can we use technology to scale it up? The solution is not technology. Technology is only a tool that we can use to scale. And that's how we look at it.
Great. And Sophia, any last words?
No, we also did some mapping in terms of digital tools to address climate change. And I think what we found and what the farmers was really challenged with is there are tools, but they're not known. And they are also not solving the multiple challenges that you say. So they get one piece of information, but they're not the solution. So it's really the coordination of the solution and using maybe coordinated platform to access a variety of different information that's needed to address the challenge.
All right. Well, thanks all three of you. That's a great segue into our next session on adaptation. So thank you very much. So maybe with that, I'll just ask our next three panelists to join us up here. As you saw, there's so much intertwining of mitigation with adaptation, with I think the general theme of we need to meet this urgent global challenge, but through the lens of context-specific issues and solutions. And we have some innovation generators here from the Feed the Future Innovation Lab community. And, I mentioned this trip I was on a couple of weeks ago, visiting different sites, different partners, and very much at the forefront of the thinking of a lot of the partners, grain aggregators, seed producers, agro dealers, was the Feed the Future Innovation Lab community. In response, partially to the fertilizer price crisis, in response to the greater frequency of extreme weather events, we saw out on the landscape quite a diverse movement toward diversification of those predominantly maize-based systems. That's something that USAID, through the work of the mission staff in all three countries, Tanzania, Malawi, and Zambia, invested in, worked on for over a decade. Sheila Roquette mentioned a very important concept when we think about our research portfolio, and that's the pipeline of R&D innovations coming out. And Sheila mentioned that it's very important to work on these things many years before a crisis presses you to use them. But had the Innovation Lab community, in partnership with the CGIAR, in partnership with the national partners, not worked on the improved varieties of groundnut, soy, pigeon pea, common bean that we saw farmers increasingly use out on the landscape, the farmers wouldn't have been able to respond as they did to the fertilizer price crisis. So keeping that pipeline full, and keeping our sights on the long term while addressing issues on the short term, we saw it play out very much on the ground. And as I mentioned, it was excessive rainfall, not drought, that was really a pressing issue at the time. So with that in mind, adaptation, I think it's been pretty clear here, adaptation for the smallholder farmer is really critical. So turn to our panel here. First, I'm going to say thank you very much, Beth Mitchum, director of the Hort Innovation Lab. And of course, it's her team that helped put this event together in such a nice way. So thank you, Beth. And Beth's team has been a great partner for many years working on the horticulture front. And I think it's going to be clear that she has identified some low-hanging fruit to address both the adaptation and the mitigation side. And then we have our award-winning professor from the Improved Poultry Genomics Innovation Lab, Huajun Zhu, coming with on the livestock side some very tremendous progress they've made on one of the most important value chains for the African smallholder producers, poultry. And then finally, we have Serge Odorogo. He's the associate director of the Current and Emerging Threats to Crops Innovation Lab. Also with some stories from Burkina Faso and, the on-the-ground context-specific work that they're doing on inclusive ag-led growth. So thank you very much for being here. Elizabeth, you want to kick us off?
All right. Thank you, Jerry, very much for that introduction. My pleasure to be part of the panel today. So while my slides, perfect, there they are already. Okay. So I have been asked to focus on post-harvest loss and the impacts there. And it's a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. So what's the challenge? Well, food loss and waste are quite high, and especially, well, really across the globe, they're pretty high, but in emerging economies, it's food loss that we're primarily concerned about. And this is unintentional losses of food that never makes it to the end consumer. For perishable crops, this can range from as low as 30% to as high as 70, even 80%, depending on the commodity and the situation. But for grains, it's about 15%, and it's been about 15% for decades. So we really haven't seen a lot of improvement in reducing these losses. And if you, with climate change and also concerns about sustainability, if you think about all the inputs that go into growing a crop, to have that crop not make it to the end consumer and never be consumed by people, and maybe even not even by livestock, this is a waste of resources. So we know also that a lot of this rotting food in various places is producing a lot of methane and contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. And recently we did some really important stakeholder meetings here in East Africa and also in West Africa, asking local stakeholders what areas within horticulture needed to be emphasized. And improving post-harvest handling came to the top in both regions. So I really feel we're at a place where we just can't afford to not pay attention to the steps that are needed to try to reduce these losses, not only for climate change, but also for food and nutrition security. So what are the causes of food loss? Well, for perishable crops like fruits and vegetables, it's primarily, the most important is a lack of cold chain. So whether it's a lack of cooling and lack of cold storage, but also rough and poor handling due to poor packaging, and the inability to meet market demands that results from the lack of these technologies, whether it's due to the quality of the product or perhaps the safety of that product. And a lot of this results in a lack of market access. So I'll touch on these later in the presentation. For grains, and then also dried fruits and vegetables. So for our dried products, we talk about the dry chain. And we have challenges with maintaining the dry chain, just like we have challenges with the cold chain. And that's really the primary cause for losses after harvest of dried products. So we have insufficient drying, and then we also have insufficient dry storage. So first you have to get the product dry, then you have to keep it dry. And so this leads to growth of fungi and mycotoxins, which are anti-nutrients and carcinogens. And then in addition to all of this, of course, lack of information about this post-harvest handling. So the interventions are really cold chain and dry chain. But in addition, I'd like to also highlight improved packaging for perishable crops that are easily damaged. And this leads to a lot of additional losses. So just to quickly talk about a few of potential interventions. So cold storage is an expensive technology, cooling and cold storage, even with efforts to try to reduce the costs. It's an expensive technology. We've been working a lot with this CoolBot technology that was developed by a small farm owner in the United States, and it works with a simple air conditioner unit to cool an insulated room. And so you can build a room for as low as $3,000 to maybe as much as $12,000, and it mostly depends on the cost of the insulated panels and the quality of those panels that you're using. Now, there are other types of cold rooms that are starting to come on the market, more turnkey type units. In Nigeria, there's the cold hubs that are solar powered and battery supported units They're a bit more expensive, $45,000. But here in Kenya, there's actually two options I'm aware of. One is the fresh box. The other is Soko Fresh. I don't actually have the costs for buying these units, but they're primarily offered to the stakeholders through a rental model. So you can pay either a certain amount, 70 cents per crate per day, or you can pay 2 cents per kilogram per day to store your product. So you can imagine maybe in a wholesale market, you could have one of these units that sellers could store their product during the day when they're not displaying it, or perhaps overnight if everything doesn't get sold. And in that way, it could reduce the loss of those products, which most farmers are not going to be able to take back home and have it still be in good quality the next day. Other technologies are evaporative cooling. You might be familiar with charcoal coolers. There's also the zero energy cool chamber that basically is using porous brick and sand that it's wetted and then evaporates and cools the product that's stored inside. These are less expensive, but on a per kilogram basis, they're actually more expensive than the CoolBot room I showed you. But in any case, it can be a fairly simple technology that can be used at the farm level to keep product about 10 degrees cooler than ambient and keep the humidity high, which can help reduce losses prior to sending product to market. In terms of packaging, we have a number of challenges. One is we see that packaging is too large. It causes a lot of physical damage to the product, or the package is designed in such a way that it does not protect the product. So it's a basket or a bag. We also, we're seeing that in many parts of the world, the use of plastic bags is being removed as an option. So I know that's the case here in Kenya, and it's true many places around the world now. And I laud those efforts because, of course, we have all this plastic pollution that is a major issue. However, when you're talking about maintaining the quality of products after harvest, plastic bags are your best way of reducing water loss and wilting. And so we see this product sitting in the sun here. If that product was able to be in a plastic bag and then perhaps in one of these plastic crates you see here, that gives us the physical protection and the water loss protection. We don't really have good alternatives yet. This is the big research need, alternative ways of reducing water loss without the use of plastic, consumable plastic materials. We are seeing a lot more of these plastic crates on the market. These here, I think, are produced here in East Africa. And so that is starting to grow slowly. So shifting real quick to the dry chain, as I said, we need to get the product dry after harvest to reduce the growth of fungi and also the activity of insects. But once it's dry, we have to keep it dry or we'll have the same problem. In this climate here, if you look at our display next door, we have some dried mangoes. If we left those sit out on the display without the Ziploc bag, they were just sucking moisture out of the air. And I think probably by the end of the day, they would have increased in moisture content quite a bit. So the product has to be stored in hermetic conditions to prevent mold growth and also aflatoxin development. And this is a major problem for dried products, and it's the biggest cause of loss. So a lot of different groups are working on improved drying technologies. There are a number of different technologies under testing and in the marketplace. Also, different ways of measuring the dryness of the product. So we need to raise awareness that the product's not dry enough. And actually, some of the traditional methods really aren't that accurate. So something as simple as the dry card, which we also have displayed next door, but also these hygrometers and the grain meter can be very useful. And then hermetic storage, as I mentioned. So that's kind of just a quick overview of some of the technologies that really we already know that these technologies work. We know the issues and we know these technologies work. The biggest challenge is how do we make this affordable? How do we get adoption? And in my view, the biggest challenge is that, well, first of all, a farmer is not going to adopt these technologies unless he sees some reason that he's going to benefit from doing so. Because it's going to cost money, it's going to take time, some expected return on investment, and that they may require linkage to a market that either cares about the quality and might pay a little bit more, or the expectation that you're going to get more product to the market and therefore make more money. So the cost benefit analysis is really critical, and it has to be done at a local level, like really local. Like, what is the current situation for that farmer, and what's it going to cost him to do it, and what are the benefits he's going to get?
Great, thanks. And now over to Serge to discuss some of their work in Burkina Faso and elsewhere. But Burkina, of course, is one of the big poultry producing countries. So Serge, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jerry. So today we want to talk about the scaling out system, SOS. We are in term of emergency. Everywhere is like everything is compiling one bad news to a top another one. So it's an SOS call, but for us also it's a scaling out system we need to do with the different innovations we have. So this picture was shown before by Edward. It was taken in 2020 by our Kilifi team. And like John Chelal said, our country director here in Kenya, you even couldn't say if it's onion or maize. It's completely wilted with some fall armyworm damage on it. And it's quite depressing to see it in a farm, and you know the farmer won't harvest nothing from this field. And the question we're asking, yes, we are in the term of climate change, but should we grow this crop in this location? Still telling farmers grow maize? Should we promote another crop that will give them food instead of keep beating the maize horse in this location? So in terms of our adaptation, we need to bring new knowledge to the farmers to say, yes, that's an important crop, but maybe for this location, we should grow something else that even can be useful to another part of the country as well. And this is in the same year in Madagascar, it's another situation where we have the drought, but in the same time, it's showing us the idea that we need to scale our system in terms of mechanization. This morning, I was really happy to talk with Carlo, Director for Mechanization, because we need to bring some mechanization in the farms. We have kids here working, and I'm sure if they're helping the farmers, it's not for fun. And we need to bring some simple mechanization tools in the fields that will help to grow more food. You have a field that they haven't received the rain, and you need to plow it with the two kids. I don't think the other kid have more than 12 years old, and that's another situation we need to deal with. That's another challenge we have. And we have wars. Things are compiling. This is the Sahel region, where I'm from, Burkina Faso, and we have many displaced people from everywhere, from these three countries. And in terms of, we have no rain, we have conflict, we have disease pressure, things are still compiling on top of each other, and we need to find solutions to deal with all of that. And that's a situation in the Sahel region, but you know what's happening presently in East Africa as well. And that's coming in the top of situation. Even the peace, we have peace coming back in the next years. It's mean that all the innovation that we has been pushing out during the previous year, we need to come back with some other system because all the pipeline is broken. So we need to educate people. And at the same time, I won't say it's an opportunity, but we have farmers that move from the original location and leaving everyone together. Maybe that's an opportunity to have a university for the farmers because everyone are together. That's another opportunity to give them knowledge, because if they have the knowledge with the expectation they will going back to their original villages, they will go back with these innovations there. So the extension officer that are traveling in these villages can have them together and educate them and share with them how we can bring some other innovations. And also that's another thing for a humanitarian worker, they're not thinking too much about the situation they are thinking, they are leading on. Instead of coming with food, bringing cash and so on, if we have some type of schools to share the innovation is kind of using their brain to think about something else. Another better day is coming in the future. So in same time of sharing knowledge, we can also help them with the situation they are facing on. So our innovation lab, we start with the first year by sharing the innovation, taking the different innovation we have, because we have in many universities and many national research institutions, some off-of-shelf, I will say, solutions. It's there, it's being proved, it's being experimented in few fields, but we need to do some adaptive research of this solution. And we started here, we have just an image showing in the field that we have, we can do some, bring some different innovations. We have like for the fall armyworm control, we can use this parasitoid that's being proved by the previous IPM Innovation Lab and work with ECP to test it and see how we can bring it out of scale. And that will help us for the fall armyworm. We also have the striga control, and that for the first year we use the Kichawi kill, that's help. But in same time for the soil also we can use biochar. And we have the maize lichens necrosis resistant seeds, tolerant seed that we can use, but here it is only for maize. We can use peanut resistant for groundnut, for instance, some adaptive seeds that in many institutions that we can promote to the farmers because the solution is out there. And we have the climate smart advice that we have for first, but here we have this advice that can come to the farmers because we have the farmer location. We can tell them what is being planned. We have the FuseNet, the CHC institution that's sending advice even 3 months in advance. We can say in your location, you want to have good rain this year. So plan to plant another crop than maize. So that's a solution we can tell the farmer, but it needs some time for them to understand that at a bit, we need to start pushing out these different messages to the farmer to let them understand in 3 months, for this year, that's not the crop you need to plant, you should be planting, but you need to think to some other crops. We have potatoes, we have many crops that we can really promote and help the farmers to understand the situation change, time change, we need to change, and we need to do some adaptation at that level. And that said, we have this cloud system that can help all the different experts to be in touch with farmers. Nowadays, we have no reason to say we couldn't reach someone. We have all this technology out there. Almost, we can say that some farmers don't have a smartphone, but WhatsApp is being used by many communities. We have a lot of network where we can send the message. We have the SMS system that many farmers at least have the phone that can read the SMS system. So we don't, I want to say we have no excuse to say we couldn't send the information out there. No excuse. Maybe we can find some other reason, but nowadays we have some technologies. And if you go even in the farther village, you have a system where you can send the information to the farmer. And saying we have in terms of planting trees where we can make the farms, let's say carbon negative. I'm having a farm, instead of emitting carbon, I even capturing carbon. I'm emitting 0 carbon, but I'm saving even some carbon that we can think in a way where we can sell to the developing countries to still bring some income to the farmer. And that's the innovations we have, but how we take it to the farmer. I start talking about the SMS system. We have different platforms where we can send. We can send it through the applications. That's suppose the farmer has a smartphone. We can send it to WhatsApp and different networks. That also suppose the farmer had a smartphone. But we have the SMS, the USSD. We can have a system that says, okay, I'm in this location, and this is the situation you have for the next 3 months. That's the forecast for the next 3 months. But some farmers even don't understand the forecast. How we make them understand when we talk about 200 millimeters of rain for the next 3 months, what that means. So we need some network to explain to the farmers how they need to take this information. We still have some education that need to be done. And we collaborated with many national networks in Burkina Faso. The program is called Canal Agro Meteo. In Kenya here, we're using Shamba Shepherd to share this information to the farmers through TV. We also can use the radio. In many farms, when we get there, the farmer has his radio that's playing almost 24/7. He's listening something while working. So that's a time where we can still share some information to the farmers to find a really prime time when we know many farmers have the radio on, and we can share a 10-minute message that will help them to really cope to this climate change system. And here are showing a little bit the experience we have last year with the Dream Team in Kenya here, where they just did 2 weeks training in ECP. Almost at the end of the year, we start telling the farmer, okay, you can buy the parasitoid, and then registering, okay, we have different plans. Maybe you will pay at the end of the season. If it's work, you pay the full amount. We can have a situation where we can have some installment payment, 25%, 25%, 25%, but find a way to tell the farmer that's a solution that's even better for you than some pesticide that they're buying pesticide to save their crops. So if we send the message very well, they will buy the parasitoids as well to save their farm. So, and with the Dream Team, again, it's another way we can scale out the system, because they are there, they understand the farmers, they understand that their grandparents, that their direct parents, so they can share the information. They know the keywords to use with the farmer. Maybe a scientist can have the innovation but he doesn't have this connection to make with the farmer to make them understand what's that mean. If every day they're visiting the farm at least once a week, they can still say, okay, it doesn't work this way. Maybe you need to change a way to do everything. So we have the Dream Team in same time educating them, but learning from the farmers and learning from also the experts, because they are next day scientists, and we're training them in same time to do their master degrees, their PhD, and they understand the both system. And I think doing this experience, they will be better scientists because they know the buffers and know how to handle the situation that coming in the next years. And that's the provisions are not good. Like Edward says, it's going to be worse. So that's it. I want to thank everyone and open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Just to kick it off, I'd like to go back to the scaling issue that Beth brought up about, and it refers back to an earlier point that Sophia made about bundling. I think bundling solutions together, because if you're trying to deliver one solution that addresses only one part of the problem, it doesn't necessarily add sufficient value alone. And you were talking about these post-harvest innovations, Beth. And it seems like from a recent initiative that we launched, the Accelerated Innovation Delivery Initiative, we heard from the delivery partners, those folks working on the ground in communities with farmers, that there was quite a demand for post-harvest solutions, whether it was with grains or with fruits and vegetables. But, you know, it wasn't asked for in isolation. It was asked for in relation to agronomy, better soil management. So actually the demand was for a suite of solutions that together. And I think as Edward was explaining this, some of the digital solutions offer means by which multiple solutions can be delivered at the same time. I don't want to go on too much longer, but I do want to call out Barry and his team at Michigan State University with their Scientific Animations Without Borders, because their production of animated training videos on a whole range of issues, from better agronomy to better post-harvest handling. I think what we're seeing are improved, more refined ways of delivering bundles of solutions fit for purpose for specific contexts that can be quickly delivered, and also going back to the youth element, really attract youth in to be deliverers of that information. It's just a much more attractive digital and approach to delivering information. So maybe that's not really a question, but just a comment. I wonder, Beth, if you have further thoughts on that.
Yeah, Jerry, I think that's a really good point. I think bundling is so critical because, as you say, we could introduce cold storage, but if we're still using really inadequate packaging, or if the agronomy is such that the crop's coming out of the field with a lot of latent disease, when it goes into cold storage, we're going to have issues. So yes, it definitely has to be a package. And I think the knowledge sharing is a really critical issue, because I think the value chain actors need to know that there are other ways things might be done. So that's sort of step number one. Like, there is another way you could do this, and it might actually help reduce some of the losses or some of the problems that you're having. But then the next step is to figure out like how to make this viable. And I think along with that bundling, the linkage to the market is really critical too. So kind of looking at market want, what are the requirements of that market, whether it's related to food safety or quality or variety or characteristics, and then work that back through the system and make sure that all the different places are all the different points are in place. Finally, I wanted to just say, you were talking about youth engagement, and I think for information delivery, that's really valuable. But also, I think within the post-harvest supply chain, there are a lot of opportunities for employment, because there are a lot of services that are needed. It could be cold storage facility or packing facilities or sorting. So there are a lot of employment opportunities that can be opportunities for youth that I think we should look into more carefully.
Thanks, Beth. Anything to add on that, Serge?
Sorry. Just to add on that, it's about the bundling, because sometimes when we previously the farmers sometimes don't understand, because we bring, like, I'm a plant pathologist. I say that's why you need to know to preserve the crops to, like, from aphids or maybe viruses. Okay, now I have an increase of production. What to do? That's the next question technically. And we try now to link the from our experience in Busia, we get to really lower the CMD prevalence in the fields. And now the farmers have the very high production of cassava. Now what to do with this high production of cassava? We need to link them to the market. And the middleman is really causing some issues, because the price they're getting, like fresh product market, is 5 Kenya shillings. So he's trying to link the farmer to a market that will let them a higher price for the product. So, and linking, saying if we start to like fight against the disease, I think for us, like a plant pathologist, I need to start linking with someone for the market to see, okay, if my program really works, it means that they will need you in a few years. And that's why we need to see things, and also think about if I have an innovation 1.0, I maybe need to, if the innovation really works, I need to think about the 1.1 or the 2.0, because that's like the phone provider is telling us Samsung never stopped S1, now it's S whatever. So, and we need to think in that way. If my innovation works, and for parasitoids, we need to think if the climate, if the temperature increase, is this association between the parasitoid and the egg, almond white eggs going to be the same thing? So if not, what we need to bring in this condition? So we need to think ahead of these different. So with the farmer, if we start having some issues, we bring another component inside the system. So we need to kind of think both ways. And I'm stealing your idea that during our conversation yesterday, that's why building capacity really playing an important role. Because if we have trained scientists on the ground, they can work with the innovator, like the innovation lab, to say, are we building the next innovation to bring to the farm? Yeah.
All right, thanks. Now over to Wajun, who, you know, when I think about your work in poultry, which a lot of it's quite upstream, a bit of a distance from the actual scaling, but I wonder if you have some insights on, you know, you put up a slide or two on the scaling approaches, but anything to add on scaling of improved poultry breeds in the context of what's been said about bundling and so on? Wondering, you know, how similar do you see, or do you expect scaling of these improved poultry breeds will be compared to what you've heard from Beth and Serge on agronomy and storage and so on?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. This is a really good question. So our program try to use a genetic approach to improve resilience to the disease. We know the nature of this type of research require time to get a significant improvement in terms of resilience to be more of a marketable product. which is could take a few years to reach that marketable. So currently, actually, we are trying to engage with the private sector, the larger poultry breeding company, to engage with them to look at kind of more of we call it a hybrid system. So we use select those birds, use our called a sire model. So we use a male from indigenous birds, which were able to adapt it to local environment, and then cross with the hen, the female, from dual-purpose birds, which are more productive in the African country, and also they have lots of the setup in the African countries. So that's how we think that one probably will be more marketable, more sustainable model to can have more of a quickly impact, to can improve the resilience to the virus infection, and at the same time, you can significantly improve the poultry production in terms of the egg production and a growth rate. So obviously, this is needed a few years of to improve this, to get those set up. But this is the skill to a pathway to scale up. I think we'll have a more of a potential quick impact to the small farmers.
All right, thanks very much. I think we're at 1 o'clock now, so a bit behind our scheduled lunch hour. So I think we should probably cut it short here, but there's so much there in the intersections of adaptation, mitigation, and productivity where, we're hoping to find a lot of the benefits for smallholder farmers through improved productivity that, is going to create challenges in scaling, in markets, and in meeting climate change challenges. So thanks very much to our panel, and I'll turn it back over to Aaron for lunch.
Recent publication from West Africa, they looked at a 2 degrees scenario increase in temperature, and that would lead to 7.4 percentage point increase in stunting, reversing all the progress that have been made globally on improving nutrition outcomes. And we are now in a situation or a status of a perfect storm. Globally, by 2050, we are expecting 9.2 billion, 8 billion of them to be living in low and middle income countries, and we would need to increase food production by about 60%. And we are suffering from less agricultural land. Urbanization is on the progress. It is the USAID GIS modeled by 2050, about 95% of population will be living in urban centers, urban and urban centers. And of course, we have the crisis of climate crisis, COVID-19, as Dr. Ghosh mentioned. We will most likely not see the impact of it for another couple of years to see the impact on several nutrition and human metrics. And of course, now the Russian war that aggravating the crisis, the cost of fertilizer, grains, and staples. And at the same time, we have food loss and waste. 32% of our global food supply is by weight is lost or wasted, or 24% of all supply of energy content. That translates to 821 million hungry people not finding food, while we are wasting enough food to feed 2 billion people individual globally, or $1 trillion economic value loss. It's a recent publication by EFPRI that USAID TAC looked at the economic impact of reversing food loss and waste or having food loss and waste in 3 countries, Kenya, Bangladesh, and Nigeria. The impact are not surprisingly really huge, 2 to 4% increase in GDP. The 2 come in Kenya, the 4% increase in GDP in Nigeria because of the economy size. But also, it's not only the impact on economy. There are several positive impacts from reducing food loss and waste. You have the social impact from making more diet available and affordable, and that have positive impact on health and reduction on illness and nutrition-associated non-communicable diseases. And also, we have the positive impact on the environment, environmental positive impact, and cutting the 50% that food loss and waste contributing to environment or greenhouse gas emission. And I'm sure some of you have seen this image before. If food loss and waste was its own country, it would be the third biggest emitter after China and the United States. And looking at the drivers of the impact of climate change on different scenarios, and how is that, sorry, there should be an animation here, I think. Anyway, trust me on this one. Increasing temperature by different scenario by present to 2 degrees and 5 degrees will increase the percentage of countries and the percentage of total crop production that are contaminated with aflatoxin. That is a food safety as well as a food loss and waste or post-harvest losses. As you know, highly contaminated grains, whether it's maize, Kenya last year, and I think they still have the problem of grain supply for feed, the Grain Association. They have been the pressure from the government of Kenya to provide enough animal feed due to low production, but also contamination that is render the crops unsafe for consumption. And yeah, this is the heat maps that I wanted to show. As you can see, from present to 5 degrees, the level of contamination of aflatoxin goes and higher with the increased temperature. And food loss and waste happens along the whole value chain. It occurs at every part of it, from all the way from production or even from pre-production in the field. And we have some research project, the current emerging and new threat to crops by University of Pennsylvania tackling that issue, all the way to consumption. In other words, food could be wasted on the plate or before it make it to the plate of the consumer. And then, of course, the economies where this food loss or waste is happening determine the percentage. Globally, across the spectrum, regardless of which region you look at it, we have between around 35% of food lost to waste. The lowest point, South and Southeast Asia, 26% of food loss and waste, according to a recent report from World Bank. But the dynamics between transport, handling, shipping, or consumption, this is what determine where food waste happens. And if you look at the bulk of food lost or wasted by calories, it is in staples. By weight, it is in fruit and vegetables. At the same time, the rate of undernutrition are at the same time, the rate of undernutrition are increasing globally. And we still have not captured fully the impact of Ukraine war and COVID-19 on malnutrition and the number of hunger, because these numbers are expected to increase by around 150 million. A World Bank analysis that looked at the intervention point to tackle food loss and waste. It is country specific and crop specific. In Nigeria, for example, if you look at tomatoes, both Nigeria and Rwanda, transport, shipping, and handling in Nigeria is the biggest point where you can reducing food loss and waste at that stage will result in improving tomatoes affordability by 20%. In Rwanda, 50% reduction of food loss and waste at the retail and farm stages, I don't think there's a pointer, result in increasing affordability of tomatoes by 23%. Those are direct impact on improving affordability by reduction in the food loss and waste in a specific crop commodity. Of course, food that we cannot prevent it from being wasted, whether it is an inedible part, or it is not safe to eat, or it will end up in someone, their eyes are hungrier than their tummy and they have more food in their belly, they have to throw it. We don't have to throw it, we don't have to have it end up in landfill. The first thing we need to try to prevent food from being lost and wasted, but if we have to go through the pyramid of how we can prevent it, we want to prevent food from getting to landfill. And I argue that landfill point that diagram should be adjusted to prevent that landfill to change it to circular economy. We need to create an economical value in everything we are producing. Think about water, we're investing in producing the food. Think about fertilizer, think about pesticide, think about the soil health that is going into production of food and we are wasting. We don't want to waste that. We want to bring it back into the system, whether it is a feed, insect protein, or however we bring it back to prevent it from being wasted. The 12.3 champion, they developed a method, they called it Target Measure Act, in order to encourage countries, private sectors, different economies in reducing food loss and waste. And Target Measure Act essentially encouraging countries and private sector to set their target in reduction or having food loss and waste. 12.3 means we need to cut food loss and waste by 50% by 2030. And then we need to set measurement and way to measure the baseline of food waste and food loss and waste and how we can measure the success and progress. And we need to develop intervention and to act on it. And USAID is doing that or part of that through several of the intervention that we are doing it, and we'll mention it later. In Kenya, the value of food lost or wasted, as you can see, due to aflatoxin contamination, come to about $1.5 billion a year. That's only in Kenya from different commodities, whether you are looking for maize, rice, peanuts, sorghum, millet, or cow milk. And there were two alternative measure estimates when we looked at the global health cost of from liver cancer alone. The range was around from as low as $194 billion to as high as $398 billion, the impact of aflatoxin contamination on the global health. The total cost in of U.S. agriculture alone due to aflatoxin between $500 to $1 billion and globally $1 billion. And that is a loss in agricultural productivity as well as the crop food being lost. How we are addressing food loss and waste? We looked at several initiatives. In 2021, during the UN Food System Summit, the White House announced $16 million in new research investment to develop technologies and innovation that will be scalable to address food loss and waste. We joined the Food is Never a Waste Coalition, and we became a friend of the Chamber 12.3. And USAID developed a program that we call US Food Loss and Waste Substandard Mission. Kenya is one of the USAID substandard mission, which means the mission, they are committed to doing something about food loss and waste and not to be standing and seeing food being lost and wasted. For any USAID mission colleagues here who are interested to learn more about it, please reach out to me, and we're happy to share with you the memo and the details about this. There is no commitment from the mission. There is no requirement you to do anything. It is just you to say that we are committed to food loss and waste, to considering it, and we will elevate your work. And the another thing, through the Ukraine supplementary funding with partnership with market system partnership activity, we established what we call food loss and waste partnership facility, where the RFA we issued last year to call for partnership with private sector with one matching grants and investment. In Kenya, we have one that will be awarded hopefully by July or August this year, plus a couple of them in Tanzania, and there is more coming. So if there is any private sector here, or if you have any private sector in your network, we will share it with you the RFA, and please share it with them to amplify our message. From just to look at the publication by Duncan and Mogere 2022, where they looked at the level of from CRISP and Innovation Lab investment and what are the breakdown of investment. I believe the slide will be shared with the attendees so you can look at the different legend. But as you can see on the top there, the small part there, which is less than 5%, that is where post-harvest loss investment, and it was represented in the post-harvest loss reduction innovation lab and the food processing innovation lab. From the post-harvest loss reduction innovation lab, we have a lot of work that have been over almost about 10 years to address the root cause of food loss and waste through research and development, the pre-harvest method, all the way to the post-harvest method. And the work was being deployed or conducted in 4 countries with expansion to a couple of other countries in Afghanistan and Nepal, in addition to Ethiopia, Ghana, Bangladesh, and Guatemala. In the last year and a half, the lab have been scaling technologies that have been proven to work. And an example, the scaling for scaling of post-harvest technologies in Ghana, from moisture detection to zero-fly hermetic bags, and as a package of intervention. The Women Association of the Ghana Poultry Women Association, they were suffering from shortage of feed. They don't have the access price, and that affected their productivity and overall availability of the nutritious eggs. The partnership with the Post-Harvest Loss Innovation Lab over 5 years helped them access to quality grains, increase their productivity, and they increased their flock size from about 5,000 to 50,000 over 5 years. And that means more eggs are available and at affordable prices for the consumers. And this is in the last workshop that was held in the handout of technologies in Ghana to CC Technology. CC Technology is the private sector company enterprise that was established to scale by an entrepreneur, Isaac CC, who was a master student, graduated from the Post-Harvest Loss Innovation Lab, and built that company to scaling these technologies. In Bangladesh, they looked at also, they developed what we call the BAU STR dryer. STR is Vietnamese word, it means low cost dryer. And they mapped it through the product life cycle. I'm looking at Pete Goldsmith. If he's in the room, I don't see you, but it was one of those examples that they took the product life cycle developed by USAID in partnership with I2I, and they mapped it to work against it. They developed this is dryers taking into account the end users, and the drying is a very extensive labor intensive work, time consuming, and mainly done by women. So they took into account the consumer or the one who would be using these dryers. And then they looked at the impact of scaling these dryers at 300 dryers scaled to date. And that means if they saved more than $1 million worth of paddy rice. 5,000 dryers that will be scaled will save $20 million worth annually of paddy rice in Bangladesh. Of course, the Bangladesh University did, the researchers, they developed dryers that are suitable for larger mills at 12 tons. And just to mention before I moved from this slide, talking about localization, this is an example where we have the researchers, the leaders, the PIs, all of them from Bangladesh. And the impact of our work in Bangladesh would not have been this big if it was not the local PI, Professor Alam in Bangladesh Agriculture University. We need to put researchers from our hosting countries in the driver's seat in order to achieve the result that we want in the long run sustainably. The post-harvest loss, the food processing and post-harvest loss reduction innovation lab at Purdue University, and they are working in Kenya here and partnering with Carlo. It is another innovation lab. They have developed several technologies where they are scaling right now from dehydrated solar dryers, hygrometers, hermetic bags, or the BIX bags. Of the scaling up of these technologies, they looked at different companies that are, for example, looking at hermetic bags. There is about 18% adoption rate after 4 years in Kenya. And mostly there is about 1 to 2 bags of grain being saved for house consumption. The handout or the long-term sustainability planning for the food processing innovation lab include handing out to Carlo by establishing the Center for Research and Innovation at Carlo, which Post-Harvest Center for Excellence, and training and sanitization for stakeholders, including farmers and private sector, and on post-harvest loss management skills, as well as supporting curriculum development for training of students in Kenya. And finally, for anyone interested, private sector in particular, working with USAID, you can visit workwithusaid.org, and there is a lot of guidance on how you can partner with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed, for that presentation and giving us the global perspective of food loss and waste. Welcoming Jenna Buko to help us understand some of the innovations which are applicable we are doing here in our country, Kenya.
Yes, so I'll just build on what Ahmed shared, giving the global perspective. I'll share a story or some work we've been doing with one of the value chains. The mango value chain, we're looking at what you're calling zero loss centers for food loss and waste reduction. I know the economists always tell me there can't be zero waste. So there's nothing like zero loss centers, but the idea is, can we bring it to close to zero? Okay. So you see that picture there in my intro slide. That picture was taken from one of the counties that produce tomatoes. And this happens. It's going to happen. A lot of tomatoes and veggies are being produced around this time. And some of the tomatoes this will be the fate of these tomatoes. And this is not unique, it's common. Okay. So that is the outline of what I'm going to present. I think building on what Ahmed already presented, this is the oldest data we've been quoting on food loss and waste, the 30%, the 1.3 billion tons. This is the 2011 FAO report. You can see the wastage or the losses in fruits and vegetables is highest at 44%. But there are more recent reports. The 2019 report of FAO, in the morning, Beth highlighted the fact that there's a different, sometimes we get mixed up with the terms. There's food loss and there's food waste. Okay, so food loss is what happens until retail. Food waste is what happens between retail and consumption. That's important for measurement, okay, because the two use different indices. So the 2019 report puts the losses at 14% until retail, and then the wastage, which is between retail to consumption, at 17%. But again, when you interrogate the data that generate the final report, is a lot of data gaps. So the data actually sometimes for us, it doesn't reflect the situation of the ground. But you see, you can only use evidence to query this data. So we need data gaps is something we need to address, okay? So when the data is disaggregated further, the 2019 report, again, you see the, the way it is disaggregated for commodity groups. You see the fruits and vegetables is around 22%, while in roots and tubers about 25%. Yes. Again, when you look at the situation, because this is food loss until retail, there's a lot more than what is reported. So the data gaps is a challenge. And then the food waste, which is between retail consumption, the UNEP report of 2021 puts the food waste at 17% in metric tons, 931 million metric tons. And this happens between retail and consumption. And of interest is, where does it happen in that between retail and consumption? Interesting that it's actually happening a lot in the household. Okay, so when you interrogated the UNEP report, to realize that in fact in sub-Saharan Africa there isn't data to even see how much wastage we're having. So this is the global average. And the report, the presentation by Ahmed, he showed in sub-Saharan Africa we're dealing more with the food loss. Yes, the food waste is supposedly little, but there's no data to justify that, because there's a lot of wastage happening. You just need to go to the markets. You just need to observe the restaurants. There's a lot of wastage happening. But again, like I said, there isn't data to support. So that's the situation in terms of the extent, just in a nutshell. What are the causes of food loss and waste? Again, we said, you have to do it right in the farm, okay? So that what comes after harvest, we manage it, okay? So if you don't do it right at the farm, the factors are there. Then we have a problem already with the produce. When it comes to us, we say that you cannot add quality. You cannot improve quality when the produce, you can only preserve what came from the field. So the innovations we use is to preserve. We cannot impact quality that wasn't there. So if it comes from the field, it's low quality, it's infested and all that, there isn't much you can do. It only aggravates the problem. Then we look at the causes, we look at the supply chain as a system of interrelated steps, okay? So sometimes when you're looking at the, like if you're measuring, you go to the farm and you say there's a lot of losses at the farm, but you have to interrogate further. Why are we having losses at the farm? Part of the causes, or we call them drivers, is actually downstream. If something has to do with the market, what is the consumer demanding? I always tell, we see as consumers, we want a perfect product, okay? So what does that mean for the farmer? When you go to the farm and you find a lot of produce has been sorted out is because the traders are not going to take the produce that you, the consumer, won't buy. So we have what you call it's interrelated. So action or lack of actions of some actors at one stage could be the reason for the causes. So we look at it. You don't say it is the losses at the farm. You go and measure and you say it is 20%. And then you think you need to address the problem of the farm. Probably the cause is actually downstream. So it's important to look at the system, the fact that they're interrelated. Okay, so already just emphasizing what Ahmed already said, when you look at solutions, so we know the causes. When you look at the solutions to address food loss and waste, there are many. And these 7 categories are based on another report of FAO. We're looking at appropriate technologies, good practices, behavior change, all of them. All these, the first thing we want to do is to prevent losses. Okay, we want to prevent. Yes, so we do all, whether it is practices, technologies, behavior change, we need to produce to prevent losses, because food that was meant for human consumption should be consumed by humans. Okay, so if we can't prevent, we can redistribute. If it's not fit for human consumption, we can use it and feed. So the last place you want your food, as Ahmed said, is in the landfill, or where to dispose it, where it generates more problems. So we have used limited resources to produce food that goes to the landfill to create more problems. Like we said, the greenhouse gases emerging from the landfills are also, the figures are out there. I know Ahmed talked about 30%. Okay, if food loss was a country, it could be the 3rd largest polluter. So again, we just need to prevent, but if we don't, the last place you want the food is the last layer, but we can do all these others before we get there. Okay, so having said that, so what are we doing with what does the concept of zero loss aggregation and processing center? This was actually an idea from the Yield-Wise project strategy that was a Rockefeller Foundation strategy, which was tested in 3 commodities, 3 countries. In Kenya, there was mango. In Tanzania, there was maize. In Nigeria, there was tomatoes and cassava. Okay, so for us, the strategy, the thinking behind the strategy is that we need technologies, but not just how do farmers access technologies. We need market linkages. How do farmers access market after they have produced? We need to organize farmers in groups, and so that in these groups they're able to access, training. They can also, negotiate as a group. And then there's need for financing because technology is cost. So how do farmers access this technology? So those are the 4 pillars of the Yield-Wise strategy. So we went ahead to do this, test this, looking at in terms of technology, what technologies are important, because our target then was farmers. So what they're looking for is storage. And already Beth mentioned in the morning that cold chain or cold storage technology is a challenge. So we're talking about cold storage. We're talking about upstream processing, small scale processing. We're talking about technologies that could extend the shelf life so that you buy yourself some time to find a market. Then the organization into groups has those benefits. And then in those groups, or in those farmer groups, we can have the aspect of capacity building. So we are using this what you're calling the hub and spoke model, we research. Yeah, so we do research, and for the Kenyans in the room is so that sometimes we are told that we do our research and we talk to each other, and our research doesn't impact anybody. And so the idea here was, how do we get our research, whether it's products or technologies, innovations, how do we get them to the end users? And the end users could be varied. So the hub is it is us, research institutions, could be universities, could be, the ones in the NAS. We do research, but we need to get them to the users. And so our users are the spokes in this model. And so our role as a hub is to conduct adaptive research on technology, is to develop products, develop or improve technologies. And the role of the spokes, actually, they're users of our innovations. So we target, the idea here is to get out our innovations to these spokes, whether they're farmer groups, youth groups, they're women groups, with the innovations. And then when they get to these spokes now serve as centers for others, so people in the village don't have to come to the university. If we've done it very well in the spokes, they come and learn from the spokes. Yes. So of course that is the model, but how it works, whether it works is something else. But that is what we've tried to do with our spokes. So we have from our hub, which is University of Nairobi, there's a lot of research, and just a few of the technologies that we have done adaptive research on that we try to get to the spokes. The zero energy brick cooler, the Beth talked earlier about evaporative cooling technologies. There's a zero energy brick cooler. Now that is an improved version of the traditional one. We have even the charcoal cooler is evaporative cooling. We have a refrigerated box, which is a cold storage on wheels, which is meant to serve as for refrigerated transport. Then we have the cool boat, which was talked about in the morning, is something we piloted in Kenya, and it's been hard to get it to scale because, like we said, people will invest in technology if they see the benefits. So that is where the challenge is, but we haven't lost the battle yet. We're still fighting on. So then we have the processing. So that was the cold storage innovations. We also have done research on adaptive research of promotion or using some of these technologies like the solar tunnel dryer. This is actually an innovation from Hohenheim University in Germany, but we did an adaptive kind of study to just use locally available material and have it locally available. And so it is used, in drying. Then the hydra is actually innovation from Purdue University. Again, is something we promoted at the hub for small scale drying of fruits and vegetables. So, and then we have, through research, developed a whole host of products. Mango was our pilot. And so we have done research to develop around 13 products from mango, including products from valorized waste, as we shall see. So these are products that after we develop them, we get them to the spokes, which is one of our main spokes is a group in Embu County. It's called Karurumo Horticulture Self-Help Group. So we've actually kind of taken the same technologies, the cooling technologies, the small scale processing technologies. We have brought these technologies to them. And so these are the benefits. The farmers, they can aggregate the produce, yes? Then when they're organized in the groups, they try to negotiate for better price. Those of us Kenyans, that when mango is in season, it costs like, at farm level, it costs like 3 shillings. That is like, I don't know how many US cents those are. It's almost like nothing. And it's not fair. After all, the investors say if they're not going to sell their mangoes for 3 shillings, they're not going to invest in the technologies. But when they negotiate as a group, they're able to get a little bit more. The problem, as I'll say later, the traders shun them because they're empowered. They don't want to go there. They want to go to the individual farmers where they can actually get the fruits. They harvest themselves and they choose, and then they decide the price. That is the plight of the smallholders. So the idea is, can we get all the farmers organized in these kinds of groups? So in these centers, the thing is there's no pressure. If they have cold storage and they can transform into shelf-stable products, there's no pressure to sell. That is the whole idea. That, because the reason they sell for 3 shillings, you have no storage. So whether you sell for 3 shillings or not, if you sell, you make nothing. If you don't sell, you make even more nothing. So you might as well just take the 3 shillings. The pressure to sell is there. But you can imagine if there was no pressure to sell, they wouldn't have to, dispose the fruits. And that applies not just to mango, it applies to other fruits and vegetables and other perishable produce. And then, like I said, mango processing generates a lot of waste. So part of our research, we try to do, what do we do with the waste from mango? That 35, 50%, how do we use it better? Like, remember in the hierarchy, valorization. So we have students who've actually tried to add value to the peel and the kernel. The peel has been used to supplement maize in layered diets, and then the kernel has been used to supplement maize in broiler diet. So we also do, as part of getting these technologies and the ecosystem working, we also do capacity building in post-harvest handling. So we have a unit. Those of us who visit the university, you get to see the small scale. We demonstrate and train them as need arises. We also train in value addition. So we have a small processing, how we train on value addition for different products. What is the vision of the zero loss center? Basically is to actually, whatever comes to the center, none of it goes to waste. That is the whole concept, that it's sorted, it's pre-cooled, we put in cold storage, we use the shelf life extending technologies to extend the shelf life and buy time for marketing. What is not sold fresh can be processed into wet or dried products, and then what comes from processing is valorized into alternative use, except the landfill. But the linkage to market is key. All said and done, those products, that fresh produce that is aggregated must find its way to a profitable market. Otherwise, it's, the farmers are also not interested. So as I wrap up, we say that we have, I think you've all heard about the targets. We have targets to reduce food loss and waste. We have the global target, halving by the year 2030. We have the regional target to have by the year 2025. That is like in 2 years to come. In Kenya, we had a target. Kenyans, we had what was called the Big Four agenda, which was to halve from the 2018 levels, 30% to 15%. But counties is where I think we've talked about the fact that agriculture is devolved. Action is at the counties. Do counties have targets? Can they set targets? Private sector, the supermarkets, the processor, the hotels, can they set targets? I think, Ahmed, you preempted this slide that I said, we need to, because remember I said this, the problem of data. And every time people actually come and ask me, how much do we, I don't have this data. This data is missing. That's why you see in the FAO report and the UNEP report, the data does not speak to reality on the ground. So how do we, work with counties, with the, industry to actually address law? Because there's the 3: target, measure, act. So if counties can set targets of their own, they can align their targets to the regional target or the global target. Yes, and measure what are we losing currently? What is driving those courses? Yes, they say what gets measured gets managed, okay? And then once they identify the hotspot, the critical loss points, we have targeted interventions, okay? So we generate data, measure impact, and because right now, when you ask everybody, say, I saw Beth in your presentation and say the losses in fruits and vegetables is 32, around 80%. Okay, if you go to ask some farmers, they'll tell you 40%. But you see the official data says something else. So until we have data that we can, evidence, we can only say, assume, and because data has to inform policy. So there's a call to action for all of us. Like you say, it's not a government thing, it's everybody. What is our role as government? Of course, we always say it's government. Yes, there's private sector, there's us, you development partners, there's civil society, us the researchers in academia. What is our role? You, the consumer. I was sitting during lunch with my colleague and she picked food and she didn't eat it, some of it. And I told her, I will not. Okay, she's not here, so I can talk about it. Yeah. Yeah. So she picked food. I mean, why are you picking food and not eating it? Yeah. You leave that food there, somebody else will take it, right? Yeah. So we have a role. Of course, there's role by everybody, but we also have a role. How much food do you, first of all, waste at the buffet or at the eatery? How much food do you waste in your house? Because that is something, you saw the figures, 61% of the food waste is happening in the household. So we all have a role. Before we say government, we also have to play a part. So basically we say there can't be sustainable food systems. Yes, we cannot have food and nutrition security and sustainable systems if 30% of the food actually goes to waste. Thank you. And so this we've been doing research, these are our partners, and we're calling for more partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that was really very interesting and an eye-opener to all of us. I'm sure, as I said, this is exciting and it's for all of us. So the floor is open for questions. I see an hand there. And get the microphone.
Okay, thank you. Jan Middendorf with the Sustainable Intensification Innovation Lab. And thank you so much for, well, actually the presentations all day have been very, very intriguing and exciting. And so it's been a fabulous day. and a great one to end on with both of yours presentation. And I love the way Vanessa kind of set out these economic transformation in these 7 parts. And it rings true to my heart, one being about evidence-based solutions and then measurement. So really looking at evidence and looking at data. So I've heard these statistics all day, and so I'm going to pick on Ahmed for this question. But you weren't the only one that used this data source. And so the data source about the 32% of global food supply, then 24%, and staggering, right? Not great. From FAO, and the majority of the food loss data is coming from that FAO report that's 2011. So really 12 years. And I'm not saying, I'm not picking on anyone. I'm begging the question out to the group, but since you're on stage, I'm picking on you, or both of you, because you both used it. But the idea, thinking about, my question is there, because we were looking all over, I don't know that there's another source. And if there's not, thinking about call to action of replicating or finding an ability to have more current relevant data for this really, really critical issue. So can you speak to the source or anyway, answer any way you'd like, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jen, for that. Jen, do you want to respond to that, or Ahmed? The source of the...
Okay, fine. So this is the end of the report of 2011. This is the report that has been for like the policies, but I haven't seen the 2019 one. Yeah, I presented it. But that also is based on text. Okay, in fact, we was presented, I did it when we presented that report, and they say that that data was based on because of data, but how has that data been based? That means using the right steps, you have to do the wrong data, and that is really they have been used by the so we have to say no, we look at the data, they can look at the data, there they will be
Yeah, sure.
To add to that, you saw the figure I'm presenting from one donor funding amount to post-harvest losses. The percentage of funding that goes to this sector versus percentage of funding going to other sectors. So it's under-invested sector. So the call of action is to think about how we can fill this data gap. FAO recently, they released a couple of 2021, 2022, they released or they launched their food loss and waste or food post-harvest loss and food waste database, online system, asking also for local level data for people to input the data there. In 2021, 2022, the World Bank, they did this country level reviews for food loss and waste. And that is the most recent data on post-harvest loss and food waste, where they did a country level deep dive. And that's when they looked at also the context is important and the value chain is important and the country is important when we want to prioritize, identify the hotspot and prioritize the investment. The tomato example, for example, between Nigeria and Rwanda, where you need to focus your investment to cut the majority of food loss and waste in it. But still, we have a big data gap that we need to fill. We need the investment on food loss and waste and the FPRI report on the GDP to 2 to 4% increase in cutting food loss and waste in 3 countries, Kenya, Bangladesh, and Nigeria. There is the caveat there. They did not account or for the cost for the technologies to reduce post-harvest losses. But that does not mean the profit or the profitability is not there, because also investment in post-harvest loss reduction, it creates jobs, and mainly the beneficiary from this new income generating activities are the youth and women who get involved in these activities, especially when it is blockchain, high tech, then you are getting, we are calling about youth employment in agriculture. This is one of the biggest opportunity to tap into it to get youth to work in agriculture. It does not have to be back-breaking planting and agriculture, it can be service provider and technologies that will support us in getting our target. If you are from Sustainable Intensification Lab, and I saw some of your work in Cambodia when I was there last year, it's very admirable how you do your work to restore soil, health, etc., in order to get productivity back up and use risk fertilizers, using organic fertilizer versus chemical fertilizer, etc. But we are sustainably intensifying the production, which is great, but we are still losing 30% of that. We can't have a sustainable food system without cutting the food loss and waste. But it does not come at a free cost. The Food System for Nutrition Innovation Lab, they will be looking at some of this cost estimate and cost benefit analysis for some of this work. Hopefully, they will fill some of this cost benefit analysis gaps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think it's actually a call to action for all of us that we need to have reliable and verifiable data in terms of food loss and food waste. Over to you. There's a question.
So just building on this conversation, I wanted to add 2 points. One, just building on the conversation, 2 points. And I was talking to Rob about this at the break. Ag people make agriculture complicated, right? So it becomes very hard to roll up complicated data to have a significant high level number and talking point. So that's why that report is referenced, because they aggregated complicated data, oversimplified it, bastardized it, and came up with a number which was sexy enough to talk about for a long time. So if we can make our own data sources roll up and come to some kind of advocacy messaging, and that's my point here. I had a team of people in dedicated, diehard, wonderful Ethiopian, right, Yergalim, working on calculating post-harvest loss reduction in Ethiopia. And they came up with a 22-page survey that they were going to conduct with 2,000 farmers, okay? And that 22-page survey, I said, wonderful, okay, go to the field, do it. So there were 10 people, 4 different regions, right? They came back for 3 weeks and had so much data, they didn't know what to do with. So, and the reported data comes to something more like 28% post-harvest loss, okay, in grains in Ethiopia, much, much greater than what you were describing. But then when we asked them, now, was it really all lost, or did they reuse it in some way? And you mentioned this, it went to feed, it went to fodder, it went to, mulching. And so it's really hard, again, to simplify and aggregate, and yet the talking points still have to come through. The message is still important. So I think the data is just complicated, not that it's not there. It's just super messy and complicated. And we have to be kind and help people simplify these complex calculations in ways which can be aggregated and better. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up. Super complicated. Now we still have some time. Can you take some more question? Okay, so thank you to my panelists. I think that was great. Please help me appreciate them. Well done.
Thank you so much. Excellent way to close out our day. Rob, you are next on the agenda for closing. Do you want to go next, or do you want to, do you want to be the final say, or would you like to go right now? Okay. I can go and you can close this out. So we are done for the day. I'm just going to give a couple of quick remarks. I'm not going to try to be overly eloquent because Rob's really going to close us out with a summary of the day. But I do want to say that I talked with a few people throughout the day, Beth, Sophia, and although we come from all these different perspectives, it was really interesting to see that we come up with the same summaries, the same realizations, and really in many ways are on the same page. So it was really great to hear all of those commonalities throughout the day. I also, just before I go over this image, want to thank the Plant Village Dream Team. As we got into the question and answer portion of the agenda this afternoon, they were handing the microphone around. So we're very grateful to them. And I also want to thank Eric from Think Illustrate. If you want to wave. He's been diligently taking notes / drawings all day, and this is what he's come up with for what we've talked about so far. He'll continue to work on this, but this is actually an idea that came from Mark when we were at the scaling conference together, and I really love it as a way to visualize what we've talked about. Unfortunately, my eyesight isn't that great, and I can't really see it from here. But it goes over all of the important topics this morning around adaptation and mitigation. You can see some of the really specific ideas in there around adaptation in terms of making post-harvest loss and waste less of an issue. We also talked, of course, a lot about chickens. So you should take that image home with you. And then we also spoke a lot about youth and systems transformation, social transformation from the beginning with some of our higher level panels. So this will be completed over the next couple of days, and we'll send this PDF out to everyone so you can see sort of the different flow of the conversation. And I'll just end my comments by saying that I really loved Edward Amoa's comment earlier about it's not very helpful to identify a challenge if you can't offer a solution. And so a lot of what we've talked about today is framing the challenge. And I think that was a really critical comment as we work on innovations and how to scale them and get them to the user. And that's really what we're going to focus on tomorrow, is how do we operationalize these solutions now that we've identified the challenges. So I'm very much looking forward to those conversations, and Lusike Wasilla will open us up in the morning to start to think about how to incorporate these international programs, particularly Kenya, this innovation and research at 8 a.m. So we expect to start at 8 a.m. So if you can make your way down, we will definitely have coffee. And I think with that, I can pass it over to Rob. Really looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow. And Rob, please, for our closing comments.
A little bit of a balancing act here. So as Aaron just said, this was the day that was about framing the challenge. And I think we did that pretty well from a number of different perspectives. I think we started the day by being reminded of some of the fundamentals around systems approaches, around the climate crisis, and around the urgency of achieving what we all want to achieve. So we looked more closely at Africa after getting a first big overview, and we're reminded that Africa is less than 2% of all global emissions, but that doesn't mean that Africa doesn't have a critical role to play around climate change. I think that one of the recurrent messages of the day was local context and local solutions. So we saw that mitigation, adaptation, and productivity could be seen differently in different contexts in terms of how much attention they gave. And smallholders are a very negligible amount of global emissions, but that doesn't mean there aren't really important targets around food loss and waste, as we heard in the last session, but also targets of opportunity around livestock, and especially around this idea of reducing emissions intensity. In other words, bending the curve in ways that were consonant with our poverty reduction goals, our nutrition goals, our resilience goals. So that was, I think, pulling it closer to home. I thought one of the really important things that came out early was the idea again, it's back to that systems piece of not thinking about innovations in isolation, but this issue of bundling them, and that in fact there is evidence that shows that in some cases, if it's harder to do one thing than it is to do 3 or 4 to get that one thing to work. If you do the 3 or 4 key things, you've got a better shot at really making a change that's going to be sustained. So then we also heard that Africa needs are in some cases are really different from the rest of the world. For example, in climate finance, most of the world is focused on mitigation, but the big need here is adaptation. And I don't know if this word was used at all today, but when I heard that, I couldn't help thinking about climate justice and the discussions. We know this is a region that's contributed almost nothing to climate change and yet is suffering probably more than any other. So there is an irony there that probably is above all our pay grades, but we will keep an eye on it. Then we got a sense for the importance of knowledge as a means of making changes, understanding technologies, understanding bundles, digital tools, and various approaches that allow farmers and all actors in the food system to be better informed and better able to reduce their risks. Now, we focused on economic outcomes in terms of really trying to, let me see, I just want to go down the program here for a second, folks. Yeah, we focused on economic outcomes, and we saw, well, first of all, we saw some really good examples of technologies, sort of inventories of what was out there and what was working, what was challenging. And then we heard about the approaches that innovation managers were taking in terms of trying to reduce risk. The insurance issue came up in a very interesting way, underscoring the idea of preserving a willingness to invest. And a very interesting discussion with Vanessa at lunch, she pointed out that without insurance in some cases, or a contract, both of these two different approaches there, it's hard to get credit. So some of these things that are almost like public goods enable private goods. So again, this is where we need some good macroeconomic analysis to help us understand, what is the way that we can try to drive uptake of these packages, which frankly then enable diversification. We've got some great work going on that, once you get, 1 ton per hectare maize is not sustainable. It's poverty, it's stunting, it's mining the environment. But you get that up to 2.5, 3 tons per hectare, and it can be done. And people in this room are doing it. Then you start to see that diversification come in. You see people stepping off the farm into other areas. So it's a matter of doing some of these things that we know are important, but doing them in these climate smart ways that take that whole system into account. Sorry, just going back to here for a section. We looked at equity issues, the importance of participatory approaches, the understanding of vulnerabilities. Access is really important. And what does that mean? It could a lot of things, but it came through several times. It's access to people, access to information, but access to technologies, a whole bunch of things. So thinking in that, I think we had some discussion about geographic and spatial differences, I think could be quite helpful. The intersectionality of equity challenges, age, wealth, gender, digital, a whole range of things. And we heard about the fact that even in nutrition is vulnerable to climate change, particularly in terms of access to some of these nutrient dense foods, but also in the diminishment of the nutritional quality of foods. I was interested to hear protein, zinc, and iron be called out. When I first got into this business, there was a huge tug of war. Was it protein? Was it calories? And for a long time, we just thought it would, if you got the calories, the protein would be there. Kibani, where's Kibani? It sounds like that may be changing again. And it's, so that is a huge call out for all you folks working on legumes, for all you folks working on animal source foods, all these things that, biofortified foods, but the things that bring the diet quality with these more nutritious options, and very importantly that they be affordable. And that's why both the productivity affordability driver, but also the income affordability driver, both those need to be seen in common. Let's see. I love the part about gender. You know, that if you want to focus on gender, you also have to talk to the men, and that the most effective way, it seems, at least in some cases, is to work with families and both men and women in the households, if they're both there, that it's not necessarily in isolation. Now, in saying this, there is a whole world of gender specialists out there. Some of them may be in the room, and I suspect there are many people who have dived deep into this issue, but it was very interesting to hear that sort of whole family approach come through as strongly as it did. And then we got to the food loss and waste at the end, which was, I think, again, it brought back that idea that we have these global challenges, but we have local contexts, and that we can think globally and act locally. And that's probably doing the right thing, as long as that local action is guided by, you know, understanding what the opportunities are, the needs are. Very interesting to see the highlight between loss and waste, and in terms of the relative importance in developing economies versus wealthier countries. You know, there's, I think, part of what I took away from that last discussion, and well, first of all, we started out with that sort of global analysis, and then Professor Ambuco took us down to the country level. Okay, how do you really operationalize that? Which was really interesting, and it's a wicked problem that needs many, or it has many points of entry. So, but one of the things that I came back to listening to both speakers was the issue of value. And finding value. I mean, what's at the basis of a circular economy? A value. And so whether it's going diversion to animal feed, or diversion to biogas plants, or whatever it happens to be, in many cases, the opportunities are there and known, but it's a matter of really being able to preserve that value. And that's something that, you know, we need to fire on all cylinders: better information, risk management, understanding of markets, market access, cool chains, dry chains, whole range of things. But I thought we ended on a pretty hopeful note there. And so I think hopefully we're all primed to hear a lot more in the way of solutions tomorrow. And I thank you all for all the creative ideas shared, the evidence, and just for a really great day. So thank you all.
Thank you.